I guess, David, you want to let Greg do his?
Yeah, we've prepared or Greg has, excuse me, a PowerPoint presentation to provide us some basic information as to number one is where we stand today, and secondly, kind of what we've been working from, and and where we're going to go, and then talk to you guys about board priorities, etc. You know, Greg will allude to it, but one of the things we started last year was a 5-year forecast, trying to get it to where, understanding we have limited revenues and overwhelming expenses. The only way to solve that, you can't solve that on a one-year basis. It's impossible. You have to have a long-range plan for trying to take care of these things and eat them one bite at a time. So therefore we developed the 5-year plan, and this year we're going to refine it even further, but that's one of the things that we're putting this model into place, so that one of the problems that's happened in the past is we didn't look and said, okay, if we do this today, this year, how does that ripple down through the years? Okay? I don't see how you can make a decision unless you understand how it's going to affect you, especially in government, how it's going to affect you 5-10 years down the line. And my thing is let's go with everything with eyes wide open, and that's what we're doing. And so what this 5-year plan allows us to do is, if we wanted to make adjustments to our budgets, either revenue or expense side, we can run it out and see what the long-term implications are versus a short-term fix. Because sometimes short-term, 1 year, looks good. The problem is, with all the different funds that we got, next thing you know, we're in the ditch in 2 years. And we need to know, if we were knowingly going to go in the ditch in 2 years, we need to know we're going to do that in 2 years. So anyway, with that, we've got our share of challenges as well as does anybody else. But with that little preamble, I will let Mr. Greg, the King James.
Please don't say that.
Let Mr. Greg. He will get us started.
All right. This is the brief agenda for today, and we can go into each piece as in-depth as you want to. And there's 29 slides in total. We're going to skim through very quickly the budget calendar, and I won't even really highlight it unless you have any questions on it. Then we're going to just go over very briefly the 5-year plan, look at the forms that each of your departments are going to be using and looking at, so you can understand how changes to that in 1 year affect it in the out years. We'll talk briefly about some budget forecasting, and of course it's very early in the process to have anything nailed down, but what some of the assumptions we've made so far anyway, in a very broad base, are. You'll continue to get legislative updates from time to time as they meet and things are moving forward. But I've got a list of things that I know are out there that potentially could affect the county financially. There's probably a lot of other things that I don't have on the slide that will affect the county in a non-financial way, but I'm just trying to keep track of those. Then we can look at the financial review. Where we closed the year last year, we'll look primarily at some cash and some fund balance topics. That's about as deep as I was prepared to go for right now. We can talk about our status of the current year, where we are as of December, January. We're still closing out February. And we'll just look at the key funds, the large funds, and some possible concerns we have in some of those areas. I put on here the long-term debt schedule. I know that's been a topic of discussion, and so you'll be able to see what we have in debt, where it's at, and I've put together some analysis of the Governmental Accounting Standards Board has some ratios that they recommend that we look at and follow. and we'll look at the long-term debt ratio. Then we can get into the discussion of what your priorities are, whether that's personnel, operating, or capital. I think focus primarily on the capital side here, but obviously all of that's on the table. Short-term, long-term, and then what the state's going to require us to do, what we don't have really a choice about. There's 3 or 4 things on that list. So that's the items of discussion today. So we'll just move right into it. And unless you have any questions on the calendar, you've already approved this calendar. Some of the things are arbitrary, and we can change those. We can add workshops as you desire. But much of this on the second slide, some of this on the first slide is set by statute, of course. We have 3 budgeted or scheduled workshops in March, June, and August. And then this is where the rubber starts to hit the road here, where we'll start getting public hearings and finalizing our budget numbers into September. So unless you have any questions on the calendar, we're going to just move right through that. In dealing with the 5-year plan, I want to show you some of the Excel worksheets that we're using. We handed out forms to all the departments on Tuesday. They have not yet gotten this electronically. And I'm going to go pick on just a simple department that's concise and easy to see. And so we're picking on the building department, right? What we have here is the fiscal year 10-11 actual, 11-12 budget and actual, and then where we are in the current year through January as compared to the budget. So we have some historical figures and budget. The departments are able to look at that and see what the history is. Then out here, we have the 5-year forecast or plan, and our new software, Municast, allows us to input various assumptions. Will this revenue increase 1% in year 1, 2% in year 2, and same with our expenses. Very early on, all we decided to do is see what will a 2% increase in revenues and a 2% increase in expenses do in the out years. The reason we chose 2% is CPI has been floating between 2 to 2.5% over the last 5 or 6 years. So that we have a pretty good feeling that expenses are going to hit that. Whether or not our revenues do is another subject as we go through this process. And so here are your revenue totals for the building department in yellow. And of course, we'll be focusing on this column most importantly because that's what we have to do for this budget cycle. But we'll be able to see the impact on the out years. Here are your expenses, and the software does the same thing. It builds in the increase as you think it's going to occur. And your revenue total or expense totals, and then here's your net profit and loss. And so what we have on our first stab at this with the building department is that they're going to lose about $13,000 every year, which is not good in a isolated setting, but they have fund balance beginning over here of $766,000, and they'll still have right at $500,000 to $600,000 in fund balance. When you compare your fund balance policy, which at a minimum needs to be this, you have an excess of $500,000 in that fund. And so that fund is very good and has a very good financial status. So you can eat into that as needed.
And if the building comes back somehow,
That's
2%
correct.
may be.
That's correct.
We have to assume we're in a lull and not in a normal period,
Right.
at least for the building department.
And that's as everybody knows, that's the benefit of having a strong fund balance, is during the lean years, you can chew into that fund balance and then ride the storm and come back out the other side and still be able to operate.
How did we get to that point? We've been in a decline for 5 years now.
Well, if you look at your fund balance,
When we started off good.
It started
Yeah.
760, now, it started off, we just picked a year, we could go back earlier than this, and it may have been even higher back.
I think the building boom really was what really got this fund balance built up.
Greg, I have a couple of questions on that.
Yes.
So this fund balance for building, which we know that building works a lot off its generation of how does this fund balance fit in with the fund balance or the reserves of the BOCC?
It doesn't, it's not figured into. When the auditor prepares his financial statements, he will separate this fund, and this fund balance, I should say. This fund gets rolled up for audit purposes into the general fund, but this fund balance is considered restricted. We couldn't go spend this on anything we wanted to. It's restricted to building-related costs. And so our fund balance will be roughly about, and the general fund is going to be about $1.8, $1.9 million this year. We'll have this on top of that.
Gotcha.
So your general fund in the audit's going to show, $2.6 million, but only 1.8 of it is unrestricted.
Okay. The next question, and I'm not going in the direction that may seem the question that's being asked, but this was a sizable fund balance there. I remember at the time of Mr. Ross, there was even enough in there that they were thinking about building a building out of it. How do we determine when that fund balance is enough and when maybe we should look at reducing fees and permits?
That's y'all's decision. But, and again, it's been this large for a long, long time, probably before I ever got here, which was a little over 10 years ago. It was huge when I got here. And so it's always been this way.
I guess
That's correct.
Howard's question, what would a standard government accounting standard be?
I've got that on.
Well, that's what we've got on here. We've set that on every fund balance.
Yeah, 25%
25%.
of 1 year's expenses for 3 months, right?
Fund balance policy, that's what you're talking
That's
about.
what our fund balance policy we currently have. That's right.
Okay.
Now, for this fund, because it is isolated, you might want an entire year, and then that would be about 300,000. This year it would have been 380. So
Howard's point is well taken.
that's correct.
I mean, if our fund balance is that large, instead of charging $1,200 for a building permit, maybe we should be charging $800. I don't know if that's where you were going.
That's exactly what I'm
That's a
thinking.
good,
I'm saying
very good point.
This is dedicated only to building. It can only be used for building. It seems, sometimes we get people standing up and says, how much is enough?
I couldn't agree more. That's a very good point.
That's why.
What is your 1 year balance show, and what would you have as a 1 year?
Somewhere between $300,000 and $400,000.
And somewhere between 3 and 4, but let's just say 3, and we got how much there?
Right now, in the current year, it's going to be somewhere about 628, 629.
So we could somehow interpolate the difference, and let's say it could be a 10 or 20% reduction in all fees that we charge in the building.
That's correct. And we have to look at each fund independently, and you do the same thing every time.
But this particular fund, though, could be, it's so definite where it is and what it is.
Correct.
Yeah, because, we've all heard stories of someone coming in and saying, listen, the price of this permit is more than material.
I've heard it a lot of times, yes.
But now, take into consideration, and I know Rod's probably over there freaking out.
Rod is freaking out. I said, easy, boys.
Yeah, exactly. What is the long-term forecast for the building department? If you ever decide to build a building for the building department, you will need this fund balance. So
Is that in the 5-year plan?
It's not currently in our, I don't think.
What's that now?
To build a building just for the building.
No, that's not in that, currently, that capital expense is not in our 5-year plan, but that would be what that would take
I
care
don't
of.
think Howard's talking about a free-for-all and just make everything free, just maybe look at what we're charging and see if it could be a little bit more reasonable. Charge what we need to charge. Correct. I assume that's what you're asking.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Encourage growth. I'm not talking about just spending it.
No, I understand that. I'm just, but I would do that over a 10 to 15 year cycle and look at it on a 10-year cycle and see if you went down 2% on fees.
Well, we raised
What is that? Because I understand this is cash at the end of the day that we're letting go out the window.
But we not too long ago, a year or two ago, raised them not over a 10-year cycle, over a 1-day cycle. They went up substantially, right, Rod? The building permit fees.
When the permit fees went up, they did go up significantly. Well, no, some parts of them went up significantly, some parts of them were actually reduced, and the current fee schedule leaves a lot of, for lack of better words, is kind of unfair in some ways. A person building, your average building permit is about $1,200 to $1,500 for a house. That's for the normal house that's being built right now. If a person wants to build a 4,000 square foot, 5,000 square foot house, he pays maybe $50 more on for his permit than that person that's building this affordable house. We used to have, our fees used to be calculated based on, let's take electrical for example, based on fixture counts. Now, if Walmart come in here today to pull a permit, an electrical permit would cost them $200. Whereas used to, they would have paid by the fixture count. I don't remember what that count, but it would have been significantly more. And there's a great deal of work that goes into performing inspections on a project of that magnitude as to a house.
And this is something we can look at later.
I would say
Yeah.
the fee schedule is something that needs to be looked at, but I would also say that the building department in the last 3 years has operated on very, very minimal staff, and is really, in my opinion, understaffed. I mean, are we getting the job done? Yes, we're getting the job done. But if we have someone want to take a day off, we're crippled. We have one full-time inspector and myself. And so when we start talking about cutting, we need to be looking at being able to staff adequately also before we really look real hard into making
And as
cutting
hopefully-
that fund balance. I'm in full agreement with addressing the fee schedule. I think the fee schedule needs some addressing.
Okay. But I think there's probably going to be a combination there. But like I say, anything we do, let's make sure it works out over a long period of time, not just today. Everything we need to do is say, how does it affect us 10 years down the road? Okay? That's important. That way we stay out of the ditch.
It would be hard to ever foresee, and everything comes around, goes around, a worse economy than we've had the last 5 years. So if you took the last 5 years, you could figure your numbers out then.
Right.
But getting back to Rod's deal, Rod, one of the things that you can't have is you can't be efficient and give everybody instant service.
Right.
They're wanting to us be efficient, and they've got to suffer the consequence on that efficiency.
Right.
And
That's the other factor in every budget is what level of service do you want your department providing?
Well, you can give 2 days instead of 1 day.
If you want somebody to wait 3 days for an inspection, we can run the department really, really cheap. If you want it turned around within 24 hours, you might need to hire another inspector. So it all depends on what level of service you want to provide.
I understand that.
All right, moving on.
So, the point is, and I just use this as an illustration, every single department, every single fund will be reviewed in this way. And so we can go in and change, if building permits aren't going to go up 2%, and let's say they hold steady, well then you're going to lose more than $13,000 in this year and the out years. And so we're able to analyze long-term the impact of 1 year. And every fund will do this.
Now that, you put cost of living increases in there also, right, every year?
Well, I say every year. What this does is this is built on a 2% across the board CPI increase.
Wages, everything.
Everything.
If health insurance goes up 10%, one of those lines is going to drastically change.
So you couldn't, health
Pool
insurance
goes up.
has historically been 5% a year, right?
Mhm.
Could you isolate that line item? and
Yes.
Yes, and that's what we're working on. And you got to realize there's also the true CPI for such things as wastewater and water has actually went up 6% over the past 3 or 4 years, and we haven't went up. But that's the problem because it catches you. After a while, you got to increase your expenses because chemical and fuel keeps going up, and we're seeing a drastic increase, as everybody knows, in fuel prices, which affects chemicals, tires, everything that we do. Everything is ratcheting up in prices. Everything has went up the past month and a half.
And that's one of the errors we found that has been happening historically. We met with somebody,
Yeah.
he said recently, and he said, what's your rate increases on your sewer or water? And we're like, well, it's, CPI. And he's like, well, CPI for general basket is not what sewer's going. Sewer's going up 6%.
Right.
If your rates are going up 2%, you're losing money.
Yeah,
So we're going to be looking at the CPIs for particular types of
right,
departments.
right.
So this is just an example. We can't go through every fund here today, but the general fund will be reviewed in this way. And just to show you here, the general fund. Of course, we're focused on cash or fund balance.
What is your revenue projection in the general fund to be?
Well, again, it's so early. All we've done is just across the board, let's put in a 2%. Ad valorem's not going to go up 2%. All right, it might, if we're lucky, hold steady, right?
No, it's
Go
not
down a
going to
little
host, it'll go down.
So,
Is that built into the model?
not yet. Right. And that's the thing, is that we just kicked off the budget, so we had to throw something against the wall, and we will see. Hopefully, expenses, don't go up more than the CPI. So it's something we will be over the next several months.
Well, what we're here to talk about today then, I guess, is expenses going up, revenue going down.
Right. The broader picture is what we need.
Right, the broader picture.
The broader picture. And so just for the general fund, if everything goes as on here, you'll barely break even, and it's hard to see in red there, but you got $10,000 to $26,000 of quote profit, which will help us in our fund balance. As I said, we're gonna end somewhere around. This has got 1.9. I think it's going to be closer below 1.9, and we'll fix that once the audit's done. And so you have here our fund balance policy, which is 25%, 3 months operating, and whether you're in a surplus or deficit. And hopefully at the end of this year, we are anticipating hitting our fund balance mark.
What is the difference? 50,000 profit, 11, 12, and we go down to 26.
5.6.
So you're basically figuring next year to put only $26,000 towards reserve?
That's the way it's,
No, 5.6 in the current year,
526 in the current year.
barring anything blowing up.
Right. Now, don't get too excited about us reaching fund balance this year,
That's right.
because next year's budget, we got a $600,000 fund that we're going to have to create for this, and that's going to take that fund balance right back out.
That's without even talking about the ICE president
That's
of the
right.
sheriff's department.
Yes, that's
another
without
issue.
that.
That's right.
So
Altogether.
that fund balance, so don't get excited.
That can be spent in a month.
That's right. That estimate is even low for that fund.
When you're talking about the fund balance, you're going back to that not $10,000 to $26,000 that you're talking about? Or-
Well, that's just in the out years, where if the revenues hit the projections that are in the system,
Okay.
and the expenses hit the projection, which is all CPI, then we're going to break even in those out years.
Which is really very small in the scope of things. It's almost like within a margin of error.
Right, and we know that next year is not, because we've already heard that it's likely the taxes are going down, and so we're going to have to tweak some of those lines. And next thing you know, we're eating in the fund balance.
Yes.
Well, and that's the good thing about this model is we can make we make intelligent decisions. We make very intelligent decisions, and not just this year. I keep going back to that. We want to make decisions 5 years out. So,
But that's very hard to do without knowing which way the market's going.
that's right. But still, you need to know. You need to know if I do this and everything stays kind of the way it is, and we can put factors in there. Here's a good possibility you're going to end up here, positive or negative. Here's where you're going to end. You got to know that, and that way you can.
As needed.
That's right. That way, and that's the purpose of this. That way we can tweak everything, tweak expenses, tweak revenues. But at the end of the day, we need to say if we run this thing out right with eyes wide open, we're going to be in the ditch if we do this, or we're going to have a positive of
It's
this.
good, it's good you got this program where you can actually,
That's right.
it's great. You didn't have this program last year before.
We started it last year, we've improved it this year, and what this does, this gives us intelligence. We become very intelligent to where hopefully we won't be making mistakes.
I understand.
And let me give you an example of what David's mentioning here. If you look at an isolated year all by itself, and if we look at 12-13 and we say, look, we're going to have $221,000 more than what our fund balance ought to be. And so if you have a knee-jerk reaction and say, oh, well, let's cut taxes, or let's eliminate this revenue, or whatever, or let's spend some more money, what you don't see is that if everything happened exactly like this is, we're only going to have a $42,000 surplus in the fifth year.
Right.
And so the 221 gets eaten down to 42. If you eliminated this 221 this year and never looked out, this would go into the negative, and you wouldn't even know it. So that's what we're trying to do, is see what 1 year's actions or changes affects 5 years out.
Go ahead, Al.
Yeah, and so these are, these models or these, forecasts into the future are just, if you want to call them estimated educational guesses or whatever it is. But I think our job here, as we sit with the finances of the county, is when we look over those things to really be on the conservative side, because it can be totally the flip of what we're being
Everything
shown.
is in the assumptions.
Exactly. Right.
And I think David and I are both on the same page. When we start really sharpening the pencil, we're going to always lean towards the narrow side, or the conservative side. I don't want to estimate that we're going to have 2% revenue increases across
Right.
the board, and when we know in fact it's zero, just to make the numbers work. We're
That's right.
shooting ourselves in the foot.
And that's why the model we ran last year, we were very, very conservative on that. In no way will we get overly conservative. But at the end of the day, you say it's an educated, it's pretty darn close. We hit this year pretty darn close. We're running, because see, here's the thing is, we're one of the things we hadn't done in the past, and we've started this, is tracking numbers. In business, it was all about what did I do year over year and what were my yearly run rates. That way you can predict what you're going to do. So my thing is if we keep the run rates right, and we know what our run rates are right, we're keeping our historical data, we ought to be able to hit this budget just about every time, other than an economic downturn, which we, hopefully we'll be able to see and make some adjustments mid-year. Still, we should be able, with a very good high likelihood of accuracy, dictate our budgets in the out years. I mean, there's just no reason why you can't if you've got good data.
We hit fund balance within $50,000 of what we thought we would hit in 11-12.
This
So, I mean,
model was used for this current budget year we're in right now. Well, right now, according to this, we're 85,000 in the hole as of the first quarter, correct?
Well,
No.
It
No,
depends on, again, I don't know what you're looking
Right.
at. What you're
Just not-
looking at. Oh, no, yeah, we'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah, we'll get to that. You can't hop ahead on us.
Huh?
Don't hop ahead on us yet.
See,
I
we
want to
have,
see how well the models.
The model, it did pretty good. So far, we're good.
It can't anticipate ICE prisoners
No.
going away.
No.
You know what I mean?
Well, it can, but we got to make a guess at that, which you can't do that, yeah.
all right, so I'm gonna close this out and go back to this. And so those are the Excel spreadsheets that every department has we will be emailing the electronic version so they can start chewing up on them as well. And as we said, we've got a basic CPI built in right now. We're focusing on our revenue reviews. We're doing monthly revenue reviews of if this is what we thought we were going to get in, is that what we really got in? And so that's really key.
You have not plugged Mr. Sparkman's probably decrease into that.
Yeah, we have not built that in yet because, it's too early for him to give us any educated, real hard numbers, I think. Is that right? Yeah. So obviously knowing that it's not going to be a 2% increase in ad valorem, what we'll do is we'll go back and we'll zero that out so that at least we have a flat line. And then as the numbers get closer and he tells us it's 1% reduction or whatever, we'll build that in.
Would it be more prudent to go ahead and put a 1 or 2%
You might as well put a
reduction
1 or 2% in and be very conservative. Yeah. Of course, very early in this process in building all of this, what we were hoping, we put I guess this is a 2.5% increase in personnel because of the health insurance. So we tweaked it up a little bit. Holding the FTE positions, we're going to be doing a health insurance review and having, I guess we're going to do an RFP.
We're going to do an RFQ
RFQ.
for help, yeah,
For the broker,
for the broker.
and the broker's the one that negotiates with either Capital Health or whoever
Right.
to see what kind of rate we can get.
Yeah, and we're going to actually, this year, more than likely, according to what happens,
There he is.
we're going to take a different tack at how to capture, how to get a broker, what the broker does.
Our loss rates, yeah.
Yeah, and
loss rates are hard.
what we got to do is we got to refocus and get a broker that's going to actually work on reducing our loss ratio, and that's something that currently is not happening. Most brokers don't do that, but we found a broker out there that will do that, and that's something that we're going to seriously consider because that's the only way that we see we can lower or potentially level off our cost of health care.
Just for, I don't know if you guys, our loss rate, for every dollar we pay in health insurance, they pay out $1.20.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
I mean, they're losing money, basically,
That's right, on us.
on us. Now, we looked one time at teaming with the school board, but I think there was some reason we couldn't.
Yeah,
do
they're a
that.
separate entity, that's right. Now, we are tied in with Leon County Schools, and we're in a larger pod, but our loss ratio, so, if they had a 2% increase for the entire pod, and our loss ratio was on up around 80%, then all of a sudden, they added another 3% on to what, we got last year, so that gave us a 5%.
And I asked them one time, why was it so bad? COPD, I think, was the biggest
Yeah.
claim, pulmonary.
So one of the things that we're looking at, no joke, is looking at a firm that is going to actually participate all year long with, as claims are filed with the insurance carrier, look at those claims, making sure the medical coding is correct, making sure just a lot of different ways, and also trying to get some intervention with the patients, with our employees, as they have major illnesses, to say, is CHP, are they referring us to the lowest priced vendor that's out there? So that's what this service does now. Like I say, that's something we got to put out on the RFQ, but that's kind of the tack that we're looking at, because in the past we've kept, we've done it the same way, and this is a little different tact at what we're doing.
You mentioned that we were combining with Tallahassee or whatever. I would think that our workforce would be a healthier workforce than their workforce.
Our loss ratio is higher than anybody else in this region.
It's the opposite.
Yeah,
Well,
Surprised me too.
yeah, it's really surprising.
One of the things I'm just going to just throw out there, and this is not for our budget, but just as a political pet peeve, is when I was in private practice and I was watching the insurance companies, they made it so tough on the individual practice, whatever practice was, that they had to join together into groups, and these groups got larger and larger because the amount of work that they demanded of the physicians in readying their claims for payment, they were putting that burden on them and increasing that burden. Now I'm seeing here, we're going to go out and hire a broker because we're trying to negotiate better terms with this insurance industry. This insurance industry has a rate of administrative costs somewhere around 25% of every dollar paid in, as opposed to our Medicare, which is a pittance of that. It's I think somewhere between 3 and 7 or something like that. So, you know, there's a social thing going on here that I just hate to keep on helping out these insurance companies who are doing bad to us.
I agree. Yes, sir. It's a racket.
Obamacare.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Well, I mean, didn't go far enough.
Yeah, this is beyond Obamacare, so. All right, go ahead, Greg.
The other thing is, of course, just the first shot across the bow, what David was hoping to do was to give the board employees or county employees 2% cost of living adjustment. Obviously, depending on where our revenues shake out, whether or not that'll stay in there or not. As we said, operating costs, we've got a 2% increase in there. One of the things that, you know, we're constantly turning over rocks trying to review things. One of the things that I want to do is with every department is look at their contracts. One of those contracts expire and just make sure that we're controlling those costs. Fuel costs are going to be an issue for some departments, and then obviously David is trying to involve operating efficiencies wherever we can.
What would be an example of a contract that's not in a dedicated revenue stream, like excluding the building department, the road department, you know, only contracts come out of ad valorem taxes, basically, I guess. Well, I guess the sheriff's department, their medical contract.
Louis, don't you have some contracts? Different contracts with some groups, or?
Yeah, to do our, like we've discussed with the board, the
Reviews.
stormwater reviews.
But those are paid for typically by the
That's right.
applicant.
There's the pass-through.
I guess the contracts we're talking about, Heather's, is a
Yeah.
contract the board pays for, and medical.
We've been doing a pretty good job of going through all these contracts, and we're weeding through a bunch of the old contracts now, and have last year as well. So we're constantly trying to update and get better and better terms on all this stuff.
And I'm not aware of any concerns. Don't get me wrong. It's just that's one of the things we all constantly trying to make sure we're getting our best costs. And then obviously capital. Obviously grant writing. Our auditors tells us every year, you can't believe how many grants this county gets. When he compares our county to other counties of equal size or about similar size, we probably get twice to 3 times the number of grants that other counties get. So we do a very good job of bringing in outside dollars to fund some things.
Greg, how many capital costs? Really not much of those are paid for at all with ad valorem taxes, right?
Probably-
Either 1 cent sales tax or
That's right.
In the current
impact
year,
fees.
in the current year, and I'm going from memory here, but I think the only capital cost that we have in the general fund is a very small number for the guy that's walking right now. Chief Morgan has about $5,000 in operating equipment in his line. Most
That's almost
everything
too
else-
small to be.
Yeah, nothing major at all comes
Not
out.
buying
Everything else is
cars,
special revenue.
and so we couldn't say if we stopped buying police vehicles, we can
No.
cut people's property taxes. That's just not the case.
That's right. That won't have any effect.
David has already started beating the drum, of course, and shared with everybody the essential repairs that need to be made to many of our buildings. That's going to need to be looked at. The board priorities, which you'll discuss, and I didn't have it up here, but again, there's some state mandated costs involved. Personnel-wise, this is a summary. Brandy put this together, thank you, of historically, starting with 09-10, we went back 4 years to the current year, and you have this in your packets, staffing levels. And this is across the county.
This is under the board, right?
This is the gray. The gray includes the county and all constitutionals.
Sheriff.
You see the 380 down to the 336. And then you have the sheriff's accounts, the board plus contract, board only, and then all the other. And the only reason we combined all the other constitutionals, we weren't trying to pick on the sheriff, but if we put each one of them separately in down there, you could hardly even see some of them on the graph there. So it's just for illustration purposes that we did that. And we have the detail on the other four constitutionals, what theirs are as well.
Now, okay, these are FTEs.
These are FTEs, right?
And we're asking for FTEs, not positions.
Yeah, we're going to quit talking positions. It's FTEs.
Out of the yellow column,
Well, if I'm a position and I'm working a position, it's one position. But if I'm only working 20 hours a week, it's a half a position. So it's a half FTE, not one.
out of the yellow column, how many of those 115, also scope to the 87.5, the VOCC only, because I guess the plus contract is, what a contract? That Cleves?
It's ESG.
All right.
ESG.
Out of the 87.5, how many of those work for the ambulance department, would you guess? I think quite a few of them, isn't it?
Quite a few of them. 26?
26.
So 20, out of the 87, 26 are the ambulance department,
Mm-hmm.
because they have 24-hour staff.
That's right.
So that leaves, what, 40, 60, I don't know,
61?
61 for all the other
Right, all the other activities.
fire parts.
Fire, library, all that stuff, fire.
Parks.
Yeah.
So, just something I wanted you to see in there that obviously we're tracking this as well. And as we said before, trying to hold positions. And they have gone down, and everybody knows what happened, a year to 2 years ago with some layoffs and everything because the county was getting into a fiscal emergency, and so we've held that for the most part anyway.
If I could just comment, I know you and I didn't get together on this in time. RFT is one
Okay, and
and
you
we
need to
had
get with
seven, we had 7 and 11, 12. So I have to get with you.
So what's your number, Mary Dean?
152.
So it's not 167, it's 152. And that's 11, 12, correct?
That's 12, 13. But every day is 152.
Okay.
You might want to get Karen also. Karen's going.
That's what we had.
Keep forgetting it's already 2013.
All right.
It slid right on in, didn't it?
This is the capital picture. First of all, this is all of the things that are in the 5-year plan that are grant related. And I don't think I've missed anything, but you've got the bike trail, what I used, and I don't see Cleve here, but Annette and Brent, what I used was for the DOT is the 5-year plan. Whatever they had in that 5-year plan, I put it in here. And so this is the DOT 5-year plan, which includes airport, sidewalks, road resurfacing and such. And I think that's pretty much it. Now, by the way, I have no idea what the Senior Citizens Center for $230,000.
That's the sidewalks, yeah. Mhm.
And those employees are counted in our number also, right?
Senior Citizens?
Are they under?
No, not the
No.
department, no, or Senior Citizens Center. So that's a picture of what we're going to do in grants. Obviously, unless there's a match involved, which I don't know that there's anything off the top of my head, anything here, this doesn't affect any of our funds.
On that money cast, that doesn't affect our funds then? Is that what you're
Unless
saying?
there's a match, and again,
Okay.
looking at them, I don't think there is on any of the...
So that's sort of what you're saying is how good we're doing on our grants.
Yes.
It's a lot of money.
And we need to get better at that too. We need more. We need.
You better believe it.
We gotta. get
That's
going.
right. We had, at one time, a grant department with multiple people in it running a grant department. That was dissembled, not under your administration, but it was dissembled.
Right.
And it was relegated to a team effort of people who had no clue of writing grants. And we fell into hard times on that grant writing. I'm just bringing that up for historical.
Yeah, and you're right, and that's one good thing is we've got some, we've got some talented folks there now. It's just I got to pull all that together, and because these are revenue generating positions, and but also the reporting on grants has not gotten easier. So the reporting is much tougher than what it used to be. So it all comes together. But yeah, you're right, Dr. Kessler. That's I see that as a revenue generating position.
When you take in, this is something we probably, David, need to do. It would be fun to, I guess, it wouldn't be fun, but if you started with the grant application through to the grant closure, how many man hours it takes with the RFP, the RFQ for the subcontractors and everything, it's ridiculous how many hours it takes to
Really is.
To administer a grant.
And that's what we were really good at getting the grants in the past, and we were terrible about closing them out.
Yeah.
And I did mean to compliment you on what I feel is a definite attention to that grants situation and increasing the grants employment.
We're going to keep getting better, I promise.
And one of the problems that we've had historically here, and that I've seen, is that it's great when you get a grant, but most grants are reimbursable grants. You spend the money and then you ask for it back. Well, we did a great job of writing the grants, spending the money, and then somebody walks away from it, we never get our money back. And so trying to fight to get our money back. And so we closed that loop.
Yeah, we've closed that loop.
And
very good. We're up to date on all that.
We've got very little what we consider accounts receivable hanging out there with somebody else holding our money. I call this local revenues because these are not grant dollars. They're not general fund dollars either. They're special revenue, whether that's 1 cent sales tax or some other fee that's charged.
Gas tax.
Gas taxes, some of your court facility fees and such. This is the 5-year plan on all of those. And now there is general fund dollars. Like I said, the EMS has got $6,000 in there. And we've got $35,000 in the general fund. I forgot about this one for Rod to start replacing some air conditioners this year. So that there is about $41,000 in general fund dollars being spent in capital. The building department, a truck and channel markers in the Oklahoma Bay that need to be replaced, and on you go, all the way down to your 1 cent sales tax. And so I don't think you want to go over that line by line, but again, we're trying to plan for like 1 cent sales tax 5 years out. Given the cash that we have, how much can we spend every year and not go into the negative, but still also have something for an emergency if something comes up? And that's a unique one because everybody knows that it ends in 2017, and so we've got to put it out on referendum before that, and hopefully it'll get, if it doesn't get renewed, then our capital...
Then we throw all this out and start over again.
It's in a world of hurt.
Because that's tremendous. But one of the things we're trying to do is assume this model's based upon assuming you're not going to get it's not going to be renewed. So therefore, we're trying to, number one is shove some money out in the out years. If we can, so one is make sure we don't overspend. But secondly is we pace it out so we don't overspend too much, where we're putting some reserves every year forward to where we got a little cushion to where we can go 2018 if we have to and limp along, and then after that have to figure something out, so we go back again to the public and see if we get the 1 cent sales tax.
So you put the fact in here that we may or may not get that.
This is assumption we will not get it.
Okay.
The 1 cent sales tax rate.
Because it comes up in 17, right?
Yeah.
One of the things looking forward in the forward years is in 2017 there was a big paving project that was done. That was a much needed paving project that was done, and currently we're still paying 100, and that's 100. What is that number, Greg? 240.
Talking about down at the bottom, the alternative.
No, you're paying
Paying back a loan for
your loan payback.
So none of that's in here.
Yeah, none of that's in here, but one of the big things taking up that is that loan that was made for paving a bunch of roads. And I think in the future, what we've proved in other models, I don't have it in here, models that I've ran with Greg, is if we don't borrow a large amount of money to do that in 1 year and have to pay it back over a 10-year period, that actually we can do more
Right.
every year all along. So
It is shown here, if you look at the bottom, the alternate
Right.
road paving projects, you'll notice that in 13,
That's
we
right,
have
that's
no
right.
money. Why? Because it's all going to principal and interest on the loan. Well, the next year, we have $250,000 to spend. The next year, it's $500. The next year, it's $500, and then $800. Well, that's the paying off of the loan.
That's right.
So you see the increase that we can spend on road paving as the principal goes down.
I mean, every year we could theoretically spend $800,000 either paving new roads or resurfacing existing roads.
Or we could reallocate that
That's correct.
when the renewal comes up to offset some of the costs.
That's right. But it frees up that cash, and the problem is you borrow that against this, it shuts that down for a long period of time.
Is that,
What did you mean by the reallocation?
I mean that instead of, if we get it renewed, instead of 70% of that 1 cent, whatever it is, instead of 60% going, since we got a lot of road paves, we could say, well, we want to use 40% for road paving, and we're going to use the rest, whatever percentage to
Like
offset.
0.5 for parks, or whatever.
If we lose these ice prisoners, for example, that's $1.7 million gone. We may need to try to use that to pay that instead of having to raise taxes or cut.
I don't know if this is the right time to bring that up, because the ice has now been mentioned a couple of 3 times.
It'll be on one of the slides later.
Okay, then I'll wait for later, because I just have a whole, I guess I want clarification of where we stand now with the change in how we budgeted the sheriff and what it was historically and what it is now.
We felt we needed to at least get it at a high level today, certainly.
Okay.
Now, to give you an idea, this is part of our planning and building of this plan and getting information. We've got, just in resurfacing, roads that have reached their expected life, meaning they're 20 years old or older, that need resurfacing. Right now, today's cost to resurface is $1.775 million if we resurfaced all those roads.
All of them.
1 through 5, they're 5 years out, is $1,281,000. Roads that are 5 to 10 years, 5.5 million, and the roads that are 10 to 15 years, they're fairly newly paved, that's 9.8 million.
That's not even.
So that gives you an idea of the magnitude that we've got to be able to say every year we got to be doing something.
But that's also assuming that after 20 years they're in bad shape.
Well, that's assuming that, but you can bet between a 20 and 30 year period you're going to have to do something.
But that's the whole point
Yeah,
of
that's the whole point.
That's the whole point of a recycle and replacement plan, is like with sheriff, with cars, or with ambulances, it's going to last 5 years. And so we need to be setting money aside so that when that 5th year, we can replace it, even though we might get a 6th year out of it. It's the same concept. But, we could probably get 25 years out of the roads. We still got to have money
It
set
depends a lot
aside.
on how much they're used. That's all I'm saying. Not every road
Oh
is
yeah,
the same.
you're right.
We've got to have a guide so that we know roughly.
Yeah, but you can't say, well, they're all going to last, but you got to have something that says every year we need to be spending about $1 million a year, or between 500 and 800, $1 million a year, doing some resurfacing so that we don't have base failures, etc.
My only point was Railroad Avenue Stop Shop is a lot different than Wakulla Aaron.
That's right. And also, just as a side note, we've factored also in every dirt road that we maintain in this county. And if we were to pave every one of them, it's $34 million. That gives you an idea of the magnitude, the amount of road footage that we have. And I can give you that road footage.
A lot of those don't have right of way either, so we couldn't really.
Yeah. So I'm just saying, just so you understand, we've looked at this and we've done a pretty good job of really finding out what all right now we've got. Hold on, let's see.
Is that my spreadsheet in it?
We got 2,461 miles of graded roads. We grade miles, like 2,500 miles of graded road every year. So, and some of those will be graded from now on. We're not saying we got to pave them. They'll be graded from now on, but you know, that's something we got to just so you'll know what we've done. So, okay.
The last piece is your enterprise funds, sewer and river sink water, and the landfill. And so this is the 5-year plan on, now, this is not grant money. This is not, this is local revenues.
Not ad valorem taxes.
This is not ad valorem taxes. This is the fees generated by the sewer, water, or solid waste department in local fees, and that's our plan. Now, with that said, the landfill closure, which we'll talk more about with state mandated issues, it does involve a planned borrowing of $1 million to get to that 1.5 million down there. So that's a unique line down there on the landfill closure. But otherwise, that's the enterprise funds 5-year plan. And of course, what we're doing, as we said, if you go back to those forms that we have, we're looking at the building department, we're looking at the sewer department. Can we spend $100,000 this year or 125? What does that do 5 years out for us?
Yeah.
Greg, on those numbers, like when you were looking at like river sink, at least that's the painting. When you're saying about the funds coming in from them, where were you looking?
Oh, I just have it memorized.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Sorry.
Okay.
Touche.
Yeah.
20 days.
Now, also another line item to keep an eye on is see the sewer lift station rehab. In the past, we have not had, that line was zero. We stuck 100,000 in this year, and that just so happened we did that, which was lucky. We put that in there because we had a lift station, what is that, number 8 in Panacea completely failed. We're in the process of an emergency repair that's going to cost, guess what, right about $100,000. But
All those lift stations, by the way, built in the 80s with grinder pumps in them. They're still the original grinder pumps. They're
And-
very, very bad.
yeah, so here, and then that the problem is if we would have done it during a regular cycle, that would have cost us $60,000.
How many lift stations do we have?
So that's the whole point. We got to get to where we're regularly putting money in this line item, because if we turn the back on replacement of these lift stations, it will cost us more money. Period. End of story.
Now, not all 75 are bad. The county adopted sewer standards, you might remember, requiring high-quality pumps and
But still, every lift station has to be redone at some point in time. Every single one of them.
How many of them need to be replaced right now? 8.
Panacea is the
You're talking
main.
about $800,000.
Yeah.
Well, I'll add that we requested $260,000 a year.
And
We felt like it would take to get it back to maintain and purchase
Yeah, we just can't afford it.
100 is all. They wanted 250, and I gave them 100.
You got corrosive environments eating away the concrete in the wet well.
Just we didn't have the money. Just had to, we're having to take care. That's the reason I was saying. That's the reason we're using this 5-year plan, is to take care of things as we can, as we improve, as the economy improves. We got certain line items such as sewer rehab that we'll start sticking more money in to start trying to take care of some of these problems. But right now we're just trying to get a baseline to where we can start being proactive and start trying to take care of these problems. But as funds increase, we can stick some funds in there to help it out. Understanding we can't eat the elephant one bite. We're going to eat it one bite at a time.
And it's also good for the environment, because when a lift station like Station 8 fails, it goes straight to the bay.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
That's the main lift station.
we've historically had problems there.
Yes.
I guess I was at a summit, I think a day ago, and there was someone from one of the major power companies there, and they were going about, how they're going to provide their energy and where the sources were. And the bottom line of that is that at the end of the day, the most cost-efficient method for us to keep on providing energy is conservation. Nothing else comes close.
Mm-hmm.
It's the low-hanging fruit, and we got to do a better job of educating people.
That's right. And that's another thing, is realize this is like this lift station we'll be installing, is the pumps have become more efficient, the panels are more efficient. You know, that's conservation, and we got some old stuff out there that's, you know, when they cut on, the meter just almost flies off the hook.
When will that panacea be completed?
The miners should be here in 2 weeks.
What happened? The wet well failed?
The wet well failed.
Pumps, everything. It started, it was a valve, and the valve could actually check valves.
Are you bypassing it right now?
Yeah.
And go like that, have it done.
Yeah.
Then we'll put that bypass valve in.
We're having to help it out. So.
The last thing I'll say that I feel needs to be said, and I think I've talked with some of you about it at least, you'll notice that every one of these dollars is being spent out of the 435 ACC fund. That's your access fee fund. You don't have people hooking on to the sewer, you don't earn access fees. And without access fees, none of this capital occurs.
So
And-
that's assuming,
Hold on.
all right.
All your businesses that need...
I know what Randy's fixing to ask. Here's what that takes into fact. You know, remember when I said it's critical that we get the $300,000 from, or the almost $400,000 from Talcon? Majority of that is how we were able to spread it, took our existing fund balance and we spread that $400,000 plus every year, assuming you're going to get, I think it's 10 this year hookups, and then 15 next year. Very modest amount, and we spread those dollars across that 5-year plan. The reason we didn't run a 2018 because there was no money there. Speak up, because we'll run that out. So, but now we're getting ready to redo this model, this sewer model, because it looks like we're going to get good. I just got an email. It looks like we're going to be able to get that USDA loan/grant. And what that will do is the initial models that we run, we can lower our sewer tab by about $300,000 and build the plant and lower our what we owe right now by $300,000 a year by doing that. So hopefully, if everything goes through like that, we'll be able to shove some operating into this.
But we're still looking at the other alternate, which is...
Yes, the other alternate, we're looking at that, we're pursuing both alternates, but it'll be about an $8 and $9 million loan for our sewer treatment plant. What it does is it takes 3 existing loans out that are high, that are not good loans. It takes those, we'll refi those, plus get a 20% or up to as high as, right now it's at 30, but it could be up to high as 40% grant. So that loan could be anywhere between $8 million and $5 million. And that would help cure, if we get that, and that will cure our problems with our flow, as far as our future flow, and it would help us financially by $300,000 a year.
What guarantees that loan?
What guarantee?
Are we putting up anything as guarantee of that loan?
The revenues, well, our revenues naturally, yeah.
Okay. And are we looking at, or, we have this situation where supposedly as the sewer comes by your property, you're supposed to be hooking up to it, and we have not really enforced that. Are we looking at that direction?
We want to do that, but realize we've got to bring that before you guys, and y'all got to vote to allow us to do that. It's in the past, we tried it. From what I understand, that was tried. It was, some cases were brought back against the board, and the board said, nah, I know, but it's not the time to do that, so therefore we'll waive that.
Right. There's the statutes are different too, depending on what, like, if you have a house, you don't want a house hooked onto a forge main. I know this is getting a little bit off subject, and I talked to Nanette about this yesterday, about going ahead and doing readiness to serve. If the law required you to hook on and we're not making you should at least pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if you're a commercial business that fronts
Correct.
enforcement.
I got you.
But I don't think there's a slew of homes with a gravity line in front of them that aren't hooked on.
No, but I think the biggest thing is 319 in the businesses. That's where the majority. And I think you're right. That's something. You're right, Dr. Kessler. That we've got to do is approach it from that standpoint. Where if you want to tie on, that's fine. If you don't, that's fine. But there's still going to be a minimal fee.
Yeah, readiness to service, I think,
Readiness to serve.
is an excellent idea.
Back when we first extended the line, everybody was allowed to hook on for free, and most everybody did, I think, because it was free. But I think when the last extension was done for the flowers, that wasn't offered. It wasn't offered free. It was offered at a discount rate, people didn't want to, even if it's discounted, they didn't want to pay for it. That's a different conversation for today,
Well,
but
it's pretty convoluted,
Yeah.
that one. Okay, so that, all right, well, I just want to know that we were looking at that fee for readiness and also as it pertains to the people that, because all of that is lost income and the only way this thing works for us. The other thing is, with this option for Leon County or City of Tallahassee, and I'm not quite sure how we got into that conversation. I'm not saying I'm for or against it, but I think we may have to look at all the pros and cons of that before we really start having any kind of serious, any kind of dialogue, really. We really have to look at what this means for us as a county.
And that's what we'll do. It's just right now we're just getting some baseline data from, Tallahassee's looking at it from their end, we're looking at it from our end, and just very high level
just to see if it's
numbers,
even an option.
just to see, number one, is it even feasible?
Okay.
If it's feasible, then okay, then next thing is what's it going to cost? All those things come, and then we'll say, okay, now here's our high level. We were smarter about it, and here's kind of the deal we're looking at, and that's when we'll bring it to you guys and say, here it is. It's either good or bad. So.
The legislative update, financially, I think there's still the drums beating on the communication services tax, and David may be able to speak more to this. That will affect your general fund revenues, and obviously not in a positive way.
Right.
So what's happening with that?
Basically, the legislatures, the state is going to, currently they charge a communication service tax, and then the county charges community. They're going to pull all that under the state. They're going to collect one communication service tax, and then they're going to dole it out to you, Wakulla County, you, Franklin County, based on a percentage. Here's what y'all get. So they're going to get it, and we're just going to sit there and say, give me what you can give me. Maybe.
So are they going to allocate, well, I know this is all theory right now, but are they talking about allocating it to all the counties, or to the counties that have, only to the counties who have instituted that communication service?
That I don't know. I know they would allocate it to any counties that have not encumbered this tax.
Okay.
Held was for the first year only.
Right.
First year only?
So, as to whether it's going to go to counties that haven't instituted this tax, I don't know. I haven't read that much in the legislation yet. I don't.
So if we put $10 in, we're not necessarily going to get $10 back.
That's yet to be determined. But
never
most of the time, ever since I've been here, I've yet to see the state do that. So.
I was about to say, when's the last time the state did
I was going to say we put $1 in and get 65 cents out normally.
But your feeling is that this probably won't go forward? Or is
It's got a companion bill, from what I understand, doesn't it? I thought it did.
I think so.
I think it's got a.
I'd have to verify it.
There's not a lot of talk about it, which is, don't know whether that's good or bad, but like I say, I'm pretty sure there's a companion bill, but if there's not a companion bill, it'll die on the vine. But as of right now, it has some legs. Now, the next one, the DOC, Department of Corrections, this would be, the idea is the Department of Corrections, the last year of an inmate's stay in prison, in state prison system, they would ship them back to the county for their last year of incarceration. And our cost on that would be about $870,000 a year. Now, the good news on that is all sheriff departments throughout the state are dead set against it. So that one, we're hoping will die. But it's got a companion bill. So, but it's still, I think with the sheriffs behind it, that one will probably in effect that, it'll affect us by that amount. It's going to affect some other counties in a big time way.
Generally speaking, your sheriffs are your premier people in your county, so it's hard to run something by them.
So anyway, that's what that is. And like I say, that's a worst case scenario, and I don't think that'll happen. But I'm at that, and $1.50 will go buy you a cup of coffee. So, all right.
The next one is Medicaid. There's legislation to change how that gets billed to us. I don't know where it came from, or I just learned about this.
Yeah, they've got to opt in, and Medicaid has an opt-in or the state AHAC. Don't ask me what that acronym means. But they're the collection.
I know what it means.
Yeah, they're the collection agency for the state for all the Medicaid. And currently, the way the system worked last year was if a resident, if a person, say they're, for instance, they have an address here in Crawfordville, and they go to Orlando, and they go to the hospital in Orlando, or go to a nursing home in Orlando or Miami or wherever, we get that bill back, the Medicaid portion of that. We get a share of that. Of that, we get 75%. And the same thing if they go to Tallahassee or wherever. If they have a Wakulla County address, no matter where they go, we get tagged for it. The state, last year we went through a big adjustment process and audit process with that. Come to find out, we had redacted and done what we were supposed to do, so therefore we didn't really get hit by this, affected too hard as far as, some counties had to eat quite a few millions of dollars of Medicaid expenses that had been shoved off on other people. So luckily we didn't fall into that. So this year, they finally got that straight. So this year they come back and said, okay, we're going to have an opt-in, opt-out program to where you can, if you opt in, we're going to take the state's, what we're projecting is the state that the counties normally share. We're going to take that, and based upon your previous history, we're going to just every year you're going to pay the same amount plus a set increase. The problem is the majority of the counties in the state, like us, last year I think, what was that, Greg? We paid $100,000 in, or $87,000, whatever it was. Ralph, I told you what that was. And our portion of that dole out was going to be $217,000. We're like, I think we'll opt out. So when we opt out, more than likely, y'all got to decide that. But this bill is going through. If you opt out, that means we'll keep doing it the way we're doing now, is actually counting as per a person goes to the hospital or nursing home or whatever that's on Medicaid. We'll pay it like we're currently paying. It's a heck of a lot cheaper for us to do it that way versus
Does this include
state
people,
system.
this homeowners or everybody?
Anybody that's on Medicaid.
And just briefly, what percentage is like the federal government pay, the state pay, or the county pays?
Of the portion that the state gets billed, we pay 75% of that.
And the federal government, the state completely pays for Medicaid?
They get 25%. Now, what the federal government pays for, I don't, and all I know is what we get.
So if you're an unhealthy community of a lot of older people, you've sort of got a real problem.
If they're on Medicare.
If they're on Medicare.
Is it Medicare or Medicaid?
Medicaid, whatever that is.
Well, Medicare, we're okay, it's Medicaid.
Yeah,
that gets
yeah,
us.
Medicaid.
Well, if you're a community of a high Medicaid population, Medicaid.
This is crippling. There's a lot of counties that are like this. This is a serious problem for a lot of counties.
You wouldn't have any money.
Yeah, in fact, I was reading today on a fact website, there's a county down around Sarasota area that's got a very serious problem with this. Very serious.
Most of your cities would have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Cities don't pay any of it, the county pays it.
County pays it for them.
Well,
Another reason.
heavy Medicaid city is going to affect the regular.
That's right,
public.
exactly. The next item that's of concern, and this one is very real. The ICE inmates. Currently, we have a contract with the federal government to where the sheriff's department houses ICE inmates, which are the illegal alien inmates that have committed a crime, and they're housed in about 4 prisons across the state. Is that right? 4 or 5 prisons across the state. We're one of those prisons. In the past, this has been on the books now for a while. What happened was when the county went into this business, and that's what it is, because we get anything past 40 inmates is a lucrative business, and we've been running about 110 to 120 inmates. All right, in the past, what happened was, though, this is the problem, is instead of the county saying, okay, this is going to be our capital and our reserve replacement. We're going to put it above the line. So in case it goes away, we're not hurt. It was supplemented in and supplemented the ad valorem taxes.
The way I like the word, it's not quite so harsh, is it subsidized the ad valorem tax
Right.
rate. In other words, if we didn't
That's
have
right.
this, we'd have $1.5 million higher.
That's right. You'd have $1.5 million higher if you didn't have that. So, right or wrong, indifferent, that's the way it was. Now, what's happened is since this month, the starting of this month, and we had rumors of it last year. They started. We almost lost it 3 times last year. Now we went from December, January, we had good counts. December it started dropping, and March it fell off. And there's no, according to the, Mary Dean can speak to it. I met with the sheriff and and his staff about it yesterday. We're sitting at 52. Was that right, Randy? 52 inmates as of right now. And there is no indication the federal government is releasing these inmates across the country on a regular basis now. They're also encouraging their enforcement officers to be more lenient in arresting them. Therefore, this is a big exposure for us because the fine and forfeiture fund that we've set up for the sheriff's department depends upon the way to correct this. We've got to do something to correct us using this money to supplement our taxes.
And that would be the $3 million or $1.5 million.
That's right. That's right.
$1.5 million.
Our exposure today is $1.7 million. If this was to go away, that's what we would have to make up in revenue.
Well,
That's after closing an entire wing down and getting rid of the proportional share of the sheriff's department that handles the ICE inmates and everything that's involved. You take all that out, our exposure is $1.7 million.
So if we don't have the people, then we automatically close that part of the facility.
That's right.
Yes.
And it's
Typically,
still,
at less than 40 inmates, you're losing money.
that's
You'd be
right.
better off to close it.
Well, you probably need to close it before you start losing money.
Well, that's the $600 million question, because that $1.7 million is year over year over year. It's not just 1 year. It's year over year.
Keep the 1.7 if we keep half that open.
No,
No.
that's 1.7 whole.
In a hole. Let me give you an example.
Okay, I got you. Oh, I got you. I'm with you.
The housing prisoners is about generates about 27% of what all our ad valorem taxes generate. Now, that's not profit, that's how much revenue the federal
ICE prisoners on
ICE prisoners, 2.35 million bucks was FY12 budget versus 8.7 million in ad valorem taxes. So it's a huge chunk of money. It's like losing the PST two or three times over and having to make the difference up.
Now, will it completely go away? They'll probably be shutting down. If it keeps this up, they'll have to shut some prisons down. But we believe, and this is just our belief, and talking to the sheriff and his staff and from talking to the federal guys, they seem to think that we will, since we're kind of centrally located in the Panhandle, that we'll keep our. Now, will we climb back up to 100? Kind of. I don't. As of right now, it doesn't look like it. But are we going to stay in that profitable range? Maybe, hopefully. Who knows what's going to happen with this? But as of right now, unless we start getting down into the 40s, I mean, we're pretty darn close right now. If we consistently stay in the 40s, we're going to have to make a decision.
So we got
To
right now,
pull
we
the
got
plug.
$1.7 million loss. And if everything stays the same, it goes year by year by year by year.
As of right now, we're sitting $650,000 in the hole right now.
Not in the
This budget year.
This budget year.
But in next budget year, if everything stayed the same, we'd have a 1.7.
No.
No.
That's if we totally If we shut it down.
If we shut it down and shut everything down, we got a $1.7 million
In other words,
hole.
out of this 2.3
Now, here's how we can attack this.
$1 million, a little less than $1 million expenses.
And when you say 600,000 in the hole, we're
That
still
is-
generating more than we're spending, but that's 600,000 less than we projected.
We'll have to chew in the fund balance. That's right. That's right. Now, I don't ever believe in panicking, and that's not. We don't need to panic here. I think what we got to do is we got to watch this and see what happens. Be patient. But here's what we do need to do. If this stabilizes, no matter where it stabilizes above, anywhere above where it's at now, and we can make, and it works, what we need to do as a county is we need to go ahead and correct what should have been done to start off with. Is these funds, every bit of these funds need to go above the line. They need to go above the line, and that'll be our reserves, and some of our capitals, all that stuff. Then we got to bring it in and say, now here's what it really costs to run the county. And now we run the county, so in case this goes away, we're not sitting here saying, what the heck just happened? You know what I mean? We need, and it will be bold, because we got to take steps to do that. And that's something Greg and I talked about that this morning, is we're going to start working on next week with the help of Mary Dean as well, and the Sheriff's Department. We're going to be meeting weekly on this, is to come up with, number one, a plan of attack that in case we do lose it, here's what we're going to have to do. So that we got it, we talked about it, and we know what we got to do. Secondly, if we keep it long term, how can we reverse this trend, and what do we have to do to reverse the trend?
We need to bank it like the building department's done.
That's right. Well, but you got to get there. That's the problem. You know, naturally you can get there by raising taxes, but none of us want to do that. So what we got to look at is we're going to look at numbers and see what we can do over a 5-year period or 6-year period, whatever that is, to get it reversed to where all of a sudden that becomes our revenue, our reserve funding and our capital funding, so that if it goes away, we're not sitting here dead in the water.
The only way to do that, David, if my understanding is either increase revenue or cut expenses, because it's still the same dollar amount.
Yeah, but let us, before we get too far in, let us dive and tear these numbers apart, because there's a couple of possibilities, like we were talking about yesterday, the 1 cent sales tax. We want to look at some of that, run some trends out on that, because we can use some of that. Let us look at a couple of things and see what we can work out. At the end of the day, it may come out to that, but still, we got to start pecking away at it.
And the sequester, my understanding, is what precipitated all this, right? That's when it started, when the sequester passed. The prisoners went from 110 down to 50. So if they can get everything figured out in Washington, maybe it'll go back up and we can approach it in a more...
Well, yeah, but the only problem is you know, the whole illegal alien debate is raging, and I think that also has a lot to do with this.
We didn't turn anybody loose, did we? Did we just turn?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
No.
I've been asked that question. Are you turning them loose in the county?
No, they're not.
No, not in our county.
That's the question I was
Down.
And
They're probably on the street down in Miami.
We give them a bus ticket to Miami.
Panacea.
Okay.
They're dropping us in Washington.
There you go.
That's right. So anyway, that is our, I hate to paint a gloomy picture, but those are some of the challenges. In every county, every time, every business, whatever, you always face challenges. And what I always want to know is, what are those? And let's not panic. Let's have plans to fix them and plans to reverse them if we can. So
we need to get rid of all anything that can potentially be a high risk for us out in the future. We probably need to get rid of our risk. It's not good to make money one year and maybe lose it 3 or 4 down the road.
That's right.
If there's a risk out there, then we need to try to somehow get to it and then eliminate it.
That's right. And speaking of that, I do have one more risk that's not on here. Is it'll be about end of the day, we're looking at somewhere around $780,000 plus for the fuel cleanup right here where we're sitting. Okay, this used to be the sheriffs had their fuel facility right there. And we've been monitoring the plume, and the state has come down and said, all right, you got to do something. And so we're kicking the can right now till the first of next year. In fact, we had a conference call yesterday with the state as well as the contractor that'll be doing it. And we're trying to get everything pushed into next year, which we think we're going to be successful at doing that. But that's going to mean we're going to set up a $600,000 fund for restoration of this fuel. The first year we'll probably spend, a good chunk of that fund, and then after that it's year after year of monitoring, and also we'll have a piece of equipment sitting up out here that'll run for the next 6 years. So, and that's an expensive endeavor. We looked at everything known to man to try to get that taken care of. And the problem is we looked at brownfields grants. We didn't qualify for that because there's for various reasons we didn't qualify. With DEP, we've already got a $400,000 grant with them to measure the size of the plume. We've exhausted all but $60,000 of that. So the problem is we got to take it. But what we're going to work, we'll promise you this, is we're going to work to string it out as long as we can. The problem is we've got the city of Sopchoppy well sitting over here, that the plume is getting nearer and nearer, so we've got to do something. And another problem is when the stormwater pond was put in, it was put over right where the main fuel contamination is, and every time it rains, it helps push it even further. So, we've got to do something.
Or just fill a pond in it.
Well, that's one of the alternatives we're going to be doing.
Well, the problem is ordinarily that
I think the damage is done.
ordinarily having a stormwater pond there would be good because it would disperse it. It's dispersing it and the well sucking it.
Yeah, if the well wasn't there, it probably wouldn't be that big a deal, but... And we even talked to DEP about, well, if we just build the city of Sopchoppy a new well somewhere, they're like, nah, you still got to clean it up. So, anyway, but the good news in that is the actual contaminant that is leaching out is not a carcinogen. So therefore, it's a non-toxic, and it's just an odor. It would be a smell and odor thing that the city will be able to put a carbon filter, if they do ever detect it, a carbon filter to take it out of the water. So as of right now, DEP is saying it's not a health concern, even if it was to get in there at this point in time. But realize you can't, you don't ever know what's behind that. So anyway, that's all the good news. I'm just kidding.
I just want to back up to the ice situation.
Yes.
Right. So, going back to another board, when I spoke with one of the board members, and I was concerned about, as always, the two large elephants in the room, one being the board admin and the sheriff, and how to get these budgets under control. I was told, well, it's solved. We've got this fine and forfeiture. It's fixed up, and the commissioner said that it's a non-issue now. So I'm concerned now that as we talk about, and I thought that the income from those beds would be going to the sheriff.
They are, yes, sir.
And that would be used, if everything went well, to build up their reserves and have them basically more independent on a budgetary basis than they were.
Right.
But now it seems like we're jumping back into the fray here, and I'm not sure how different it is.
Well,
ice to operate, not just to build reserves, to operate.
Well,
That's where the key.
Here's when last year when we saw all this, we said we've got to do something. We got to take a first step at trying to fix this problem. And the sheriff's department was, as you all know, was scattered all throughout the general fund. At the end of the day, he said let's pull it all together so we can see exactly what we've got. Pull the ICE inmates in there. Let's go ahead and isolate that into one picture. Then what we said, okay, what can we do we know this is going to go away. We got to do something here that says if it goes away, number one, it's fairly isolated here, but also we got to have a mechanism to build a reserve that's specific for that, because the problem was going to be is if it got blended up into the general fund, more than likely we'd have never reserved for it. So this was to isolate it so we could reserve for it. The problem that has happened, we wouldn't be having this conversation today if all of a sudden the ICE inmates hadn't suddenly dropped. Because what could have happened is we got 2 or 3 years at the rate that we were going, we could said, okay, we're going to have a problem with ICE inmates, but we got a couple of years of reserves to chew into for the sheriff's department funding. They'll be able to chew in those reserves while we're figuring out how to handle this problem. today, they're sitting, the sheriff's got $1.1 million in reserves in their fine and forfeiture fund. And the problem is if it keeps up this same run rate right now, they'll have to chew into that by $600,000 this year and year over year.
I think it has a little bit to do with the miscommunication
Right.
that just setting up a fine and forfeiture fund was not going to solve the problem.
Solve nothing.
Right.
It was the first step.
It's the first step in solving the problem. That's right.
If this year we had 110 inmates, and next year we had 110, and year after year we had 110, in about 3 or 4 years, we'd have $5.4 million sitting in that fund,
Reserve.
in reserve.
Right.
And then in that 6th year, if I said we're yanking them off, we would immediately have a $1.7 million deficit, which we would be able to eat into that $5.4 million as needed.
Until we figure
It
it
would
out.
give us a 2 to 3 year window to deal with this problem.
That's right.
Well, now we haven't had the opportunity to, A, build that reserve,
Yeah.
and now we've skipped that step, and we're immediately talking about the yanking.
Right. And the
Hopefully it's
first,
temporary.
the very first step to fix this problem was to set up this fine and forfeiture fund, because now we got everything parked, all the sheriff's stuff is parked under one sheet, basically, to where, and there's a plan for them to be able to reserve based upon these revenues, and a reserve plan that was passed by the board that says, here's how you're going to reserve it, and here's the amount that you're going to do. The problem is, we were at least hoping to get a year or two into it, but not 3 months in, and all of a sudden, or 4 months in, and the bottom drop out. Now, like I say, we don't need to panic. We need to watch it, because this could be not an anomaly, and we could get back up, or this could be our run rate running on. But we'll keep you up to date. Like I say, I'm meeting with the sheriff next Friday on this. I plan on meeting with him regularly on this, and like I say, we're going to develop contingency plans, that if it's all of a sudden we say pull the plug, here's what we'll have to do. As well as I want to develop a contingency plan if it gets back to some normal rate that's where it makes sense, that we can start reversing this trend.
And one more thing about the fund balance in that fund, and I was talking with Mary Dean today.
I got some more.
Don't forget the general fund borrowed from that rainy day fund a couple years ago. We still owe that fund $400,000. And so, today what we really ought to have is $1.4 or $1.5 million in that fund. So there's a lot of moving parts to that.
Yeah, it doesn't leave me with a warm and fuzzy feeling from the county when we have, but I'm saying as far as, I find it hard to accept owing back to another part of government that has a fund that we've allowed them to keep under their hat. And normally, as I see in other communities, that fund rolls back to the general fund of the county at the end of each year, and it's not handled the way we're handling this one. So
That fund is not for their exclusive use either.
I'd like to add that fund is included in the general fund balance.
It is. That's
It-
correct.
We can, it's our money.
that's what I mean. I mean, how are we
Dedicated
paying?
just to them.
Yeah, but for us to say, okay, we had this note on the books to return 600,000 or whatever, it's our county, we're all in the same county.
Well,
It's all the same
I
money.
understand you. Maybe he shouldn't, we don't owe them.
No, accounting-wise, literally, we owe that fund. Now, can you forgive that debt? Sure you can.
Who has the authority to
You owe
redo
it to
it?
yourself.
Who has the authority to forgive the debt?
We do. We owe it to ourselves, basically.
But here's the point.
It's like saying you borrowed from your savings account or you borrowed from your 401k to pay your house down. You owe your 401k that money back, but if you decide not to pay it,
That's why at the end of the day, this is all semantics. If that fund had $0 in it, and we didn't owe them anything and they didn't have anything, the general fund ultimately is going to be responsible for any other fund. Forget the fine and forfeiture fund, the road department, sewer, solid waste, whatever it is, whatever other fund goes into deficit, the general fund is obligated to fill that hole in that void. And so you've got baskets of dollars, but at the end of the day, it's all the same.
I'm good with that.
All right, Greg?
Well, I added one more thing. Brett was mentioning, at least let's finish this slide on a good note. Let's talk about update on the store.
It better be real good.
Restore Act. I don't know if this is good or not. As you know, the Restore Act, the government and BP and Transocean and Halliburton are in court today, and unless somebody's got a news alert, it still hasn't settled, and they're all pointing fingers at each other. So we were hoping a settlement would come about before the trial, but it hasn't. From everything I can read, it sounds like to me, and again, doesn't mean anything, but from what the prognosticators were saying, if it doesn't settle this week, that it's probably going to go the term of the trial.
You say if it doesn't settle this week?
Does not settle this week. Just based on the evidence that's coming up and how the trial progresses. But that was prognosticators, and everybody picked the 49ers to win the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. So we'll have to wait and see on the Restore Act. There is some Restore Act dollars that we're going to be looking at, hopefully getting this summer, that came from the Transocean settlement, and we're waiting for guidance on those from but that's not a big chunk of change. It's $2 million, but still, we'll be looking at that hopefully this summer, being able to tap into that. But the big one will come after this trial is over and/or it's settled, somewhere in between. And right now we've turned in some projects, excuse me, to DEP for pots 2 and 3. If that ever comes about, I'd sent you guys that last week. So, but our Restore Act committee, believe it or not, we have a very good Restore Act committee that is within the county here that is being proactive. A lot of talent on that committee, and they're moving forward. We'll be going with to Panacea, our first town hall meeting. Then each community around, they're going to go ahead and do the town hall meetings to educate the public. So I'm really encouraged. We had a good meeting last night, and next week we've got meetings. So they're really doing a good job. So when this thing does come down, the good news is y'all will have you got a committee there that's working hard, and they'll bring you guys projects well vetted. Okay.
All right. Let's look at how we closed the year. What this next slide does is looks at fund balance across all the funds in baskets. This slide here is looking at your general fund dollars. As I said before, for example, with the building department, they're included in the general fund. They're rolled up for audit purposes. And so in total, we would have $2.7 million in fund balance as last year closed. But 628 of that is restricted. That's in the restricted column. We can't spend that on anything we want. It's restricted to building. And there are other non-spendables like inventory or prepaid expenses. Committed is like a trust fund or something like that. And there's some of that in the clerk's funds. And then you'll notice, remember David was talking about the $600,000 we're setting aside for the old jail fuel cleanup. Next year we know we're going to have $600,000. It's possibly going to be as high as $700,000 in hard costs. Now that might stretch across 2 years, but we're trying to get the Stillman Associates to give us an exact amount by year for what we'll need. And so we've assigned $600,000 of our general fund budget to that purpose. And so of the 2.7, you really have 1.263 that you could spend tomorrow if you wanted to. So that's what this slide is sharing with you. Now out to the right, you have a column that shows what our fund balance ought to be based on your fund balance policy that you adopted last year, and that's 2.2. And so we have right at $1 million deficit that we still need to build up to. And that's how we analyze our activities compared to where we ought to be. Now, again, if that old jail wasn't there, clean up there, we would almost be there. But that came up this year and set us back. That's the general fund. And then this next slide shows all your special revenue funds. That's from the recreation user fees that Peggy has there, all the way down to 911 fees at the bottom, the sheriff's office, and everything in between. I've highlighted a couple sections for you that really you need to focus on. That's obviously the sheriff's fine and forfeiture fund. That there's the $1 million that we were just talking about. That is the amount that you could spend. But we know we'll probably be using that for. If it's in red, as the key says up above, that means that you have a debt service payment in it, and we have a minimum that we need to have in that fund, and that's 1 year's worth of debt service. The road department is there. You'll notice that the road department is actually in the negative, $61,000. That looks bad. But considering that it was a negative 400 2 years ago, we're pulling our way out of that hole. Road department, let's see, and then fire department down there. Fire department has a surplus as well, and it's doing fine.
Now, also I've noticed the Northwood roads.
Yes.
Was that paid off?
No, sir, that's being paid off by those property
The
owners.
assessments.
Oh, okay.
Yes, sir.
Somehow I had it in my mind that they had made some kind of huge payment or something.
No, sir.
Okay.
And again, if you look, notice the 2 cent gas tax, when you combine the 187 and the negative 61, we have a positive fund balance in the road fund. But that 2 cent is supposed to be dedicated to capital purchases. So that's why we still isolate it. Then you have your capital funds, which is your capital projects, capital grants, impact fees, 1 cent sales tax, Scoffins grants, those kinds of things. And there's only 2 funds that have a minimum or a set established fund balance policy, and that is because of the debt service payments in those. And that's your public facility 1 cent sales tax and your road paving 1 cent sales tax. But both of those funds are in the surplus, so we're doing fine there. And then finally, you have your enterprise funds, sewer, river sink, and the landfill. And again, you have a negative unassigned fund balance in the sewer fund of 193. The access fees is a positive 178, almost offsetting it, so we're essentially at zero, again, which is bad, but considering that 2 years ago it was probably negative 6, we've dug our way out of this hole, and a couple more years and we hope to turn that around. Same with the landfill. You remember the landfill 2 or 3 years ago, it was $1 million in the hole. And so now we are looking at only a negative 167, and next year that should go pull itself way out. So
It'll pull itself out, but also we're going to probably out of this now. We've also got factored in the 5-year plan is the paying back of the mortgage, the borrowing of the $1 million. We'll factor that in the 5-year plan. That's where that'll be a revenue source that we'll encumber for that $1 million loan, and the fund is set up to be able to pay that off.
now one
Or the
caveat.
fees are set to be able to pay that off.
That's correct. One thing I want to make you aware of here is that the $1 million deficit was made up by general fund dollars, because as Heather has already pointed out, you cannot bill your way out of that deficit with that waste pro assessment. And so we've worked our way out of this hole almost completely based on the general fund transfers that have been made over the last 3 years.
Could that deficit be forgiven by the board?
Technically, yes, I suppose, but
Is the solid waste, to boil down, is it
y'all don't
bringing
know
in
about
more,
that,
is the assessment bringing in more money than it's spending?
Yes, just enough to cover. It's covering our administrative costs, the cost of the tax collector, the property appraiser, ESG, and some landfill, some monitoring costs.
It's not bringing in profit. It's
not bringing
covering, it's
right.
covering
Well,
more
my
than what
point
you
is that
pay to
we
Waste
can't-
Pro, but not more than your costs that are associated with your
You're right,
solid waste.
you're right.
We can't do an interfund transfer and there's no profit.
Can't
in there.
take that anyway, no. It stays there.
9% franchise
That's one of
fee,
those things
right?
where-
Is that what we're talking about?
The commercial franchise fee is there as well, and
Right.
that's part of the mix. I don't think there's any great amount of profit from that either.
Very little that we collected all there.
Do we have a contract on that commercial?
Commercial franchise fee, we get it from Waste Pro.
It's a separate schedule from the residential?
Yes, because residential is billed through the non-ad valorem assessment process.
Correct.
So we retain the amount of the fee, and it's actually less than the commercial franchise fee in order to keep those assessments down. The commercial, all commercial is direct billed by Waste Pro. We're not part of collecting that money, so they have to remit that to the county.
Okay, but there's a set formula.
Yes, it's a set percentage of gross receipts.
Okay.
So this is just to illustrate that we're analyzing cash position or fund balance position based on every fund and making sure that we're moving towards our minimum fund balance policy.
What was that Wilderness Coast Libraries under the fiduciary funds, that $111,000?
Fiduciary agency funds, what the state does is gives us the grant that they operate on, and then every month Wilderness Coast's accountant sends us a check register of how much we need to cover, and so we transfer money to them every month. And we're basically just an agency. We're holding their cash on their behalf. We couldn't spend it on anything we wanted to. It's theirs.
Okay.
And there was actually a rationale why it was originally done with the timing of their funding and the fact that they couldn't pay bills for a little period of time without an agent. It could kind of help them with that one little flow period between their funding delay. And so we're one of the big funders. And so I'll blame it on the former clerk for that.
And then the final one down there is your industrial development authority. They have a little bit of cash there that they use for their purposes. This is just, again, an illustration to help you see where we've come in the last couple of years. It's a hard chart to follow in the sense that, let's look at the top line.
Those are months, Greg, or these
Those are
January, February?
Those are months, yes. And of course, what you see is in the first column, that's October. And if you'll notice that for several years, all but one, the top red line, every year we start out in the general fund in the negative in cash. And that's because and technically what we've been doing is borrowing from all these other funds that have cash because we haven't received our taxes yet and because we don't have sufficient fund balance. And so you'll notice that every one of those lines starts out below zero, whereas in 07-08 it was just about $750,000. And so you see the spike every year in October to November, or December, November to December. That's our ad valorem taxes, where our position rises, and then we eat off of that throughout the rest of the year. It goes down, and the way to read this is, for example, with the top line where it ends, just imagine it now with the green, which is 08-09. Imagine it just looping back around to start with the next year, and then you do the same thing.
How can 11-12 end at 0 and then 12-13 starts at negative?
What's that now?
If it's looping around when you get to the far right hand, when it hits 0, right?
It doesn't hit 0. It just happened to finish very close to it.
Okay.
All right, let's take this one right here, this green. Yeah, it hit close to 0, but then you have a month's worth of expenses, and so that's why it drops.
I got you.
So
But technically, we had $1 million, but that, by the way it works out, it put us $1 million below. But actually, we had a meeting, it's hard to explain.
That's October's activity
Right.
in that loop.
So on a high view of, why did you not have that scenario in 0708?
Well, because we had plenty of fund balance, and then
Okay.
between 07, 08, and 10, 11, remember, we spent all that cash, and it's gone.
Right.
So,
It's a boom days.
I wouldn't say we had plenty of fund balance,
Well,
but I would
yeah.
say compared with the latter years, we had plenty. But
And I
if we
think-
get it back up to the targeted amounts, then we're gonna be up from the highest year on all future years if we can maintain that position.
07, 08 was living off the good years of 05, 06.
Well, we had built up some considerable
Those
reserves.
was on.
Now, one of the things that that I like to manage by, and this comes from the private side, is cash. Greg can tell you, I talk cash to him where we're at daily, every morning at 8 o'clock. Okay, and you want to know why some things haven't been, haven't been taken care of? Is I want to make sure, I don't care what's in the budget, that doesn't mean anything to me as far as spending. What I worry about is cash. Where do we stand physically? How are our incomes coming in? Where does our cash level stand? Okay, then what we do is before we buy anything, am I right in the net? Before we buy anything, we say, what's our cash position? Where are we? What do we expect to do? So understand, this is the chart, and what I watch with Greg, this is one of the main barometers that I look at. What is our cash position? And like I say, I don't care what the budget says that we can spend it, it's whether or not we're in the cash position at the time, and long range, what that cash position is going to look like. Mary Dean can tell you the same thing.
Do you have the money in the bank, in other words, not just...
That's right. Have I got the money in the bank? Am I going, based on everything that we're buying, we've got it now, instead of people just running out and buying stuff, we bring it back through and there's a process, and we sit down every purchase
Get the time.
and say, do we have the cash to pay for it if we pay for this, and we pay for that based on everything else we're paying. So we're watching it, we're managing it based on cash, not on budget. So just to let you know, the management type.
Luckily, you get a big bump there in that first...
That's good and bad. That's one of those things that's great when it's up, but it's managing that fall. So what I want to do is try to get that arc, try to keep that arc as level as I can for as long as I can.
You want to keep the spending level.
That's right. And so that's where it's a little different because you get that one big bump. So.
And that's where I was going to mention, if we, unless you have any more questions to end on this, is that orange line, and I went ahead and added in 12, 13, even though we've been looking at how we closed last year, because we want that orange line to get up above all these other lines and get back to where we were back in 07, 08, and then not try to have this huge crash here at the end. And
ultimately in the general fund, where I want to get to, and this is one of the things that helps us out, and we'll really see it this year, is your PST and CST tax, because that's a month over month over month it comes in versus your sudden spikes, and it makes managing, actually I think at the end of the day we can run the government cheaper because we can all of a sudden start pacing purchases out, as well as taking advantage of some discounting and some stuff like that, because we're able to have cash at the end of the year that if we normally everybody in government, before I understand it, spent money like a madman in January and February and March, and then you started slacking off. But my thing is, if I can pace that out to where I roll cash over year, then we can start buying things and getting discounts on paying things off early on the paying notes off early, where we can get 20% discounts. I mean, that's what I want to get to.
David?
Yes, sir.
Along that same line, if we could get this built up where we can be proactive with the lift station and do the $60,000 repair. That's right. Before.
That's right.
It hits the fan, then we save.
Literally.
The difference.
That's right.
Well, we basically just have to quit spending money and get cash.
Well, and that's the way we're looking at this. Is I'm looking at it on a cash basis. How do we stand? And we're trying to arc this thing out to where we can become. It's a little quirky right now, but we're going to get better and better and better at it.
Well, want to just agree with Commissioner Moore that, we have to really be looking at, if we keep on finding projects to spend on, no matter how good those projects are, when we still don't have our position straightened away, we don't have a solution.
That's right. I have a question too. How did we end 07, 08 with 1.5 million and then begin 08, 09 negative 400 it looks like? That's that extra
Accrued expenses.
accrued expenses. That's the reason that's
Dealing with end of the month expenses, so September 30th ends
okay.
on one of these lines, and then the next line is October 30th. And so you've got a whole month's worth of expenses, and you haven't gotten any revenue.
No revenue.
In fact, there's 2 months that do that. That's why you see really the drop from one end of the chart to the next, and then again, some of the lines are holding steady, but you've got October and November where you have no substantial revenues whatsoever. And so you're really spending, it's almost like you're spending 14 months of expenses and you're only getting 10 months of revenues. Kind of that idea, it's going down October and November until the end of November or December when you get your taxes.
If you could bring your line on the right down to October, November,
Right.
it would show.
And if I could redo this where I could start with October or November, December, and then those lines down here would just be tacked on to the end down here. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and what I'm trying to do is get it where I end that line. I want to end my cash position this coming up year. I want to end my cash position at about $2 million.
Yeah, if he for the purpose of visual, if he brings that line on the right hand side, you can see it better.
Well, I mean, you look at what we did last year. We ended it at $1 million last year. Our cash position went into this chart, and that's what I announced. But the year before it was at zero, and 2 years before it was at zero, and it was $2 million in the hole in 09, 010.
I see you.
So my thing is, I want to get it to 2 million, if we can, 2.5, and then we can start running things better. You know what I mean? Just instead of herky jerky, we can run things better and do things. That's the reason I want to do things on a calculated basis. Okay, Greg.
All right, current year, again, we look at cash, we're looking at revenues constantly. Every month, this is the summary page, and there's a lot more to it. David can tell you. I hid about 30 lines in between all of this that we are trying to analyze. What's this expense doing? What's this revenue doing? And sort of cyclically adjusting. And I'll just give you an example. We're looking at 3 months of activity here, but we only had 2 months of state revenues because they're a month behind. And so in the middle here, I'm adjusting for that, knowing that I really ought to have 3 months of revenues. And so there's some adjustments that I've hidden here for purposes of presentation, but it shows our revenues in one column, our expenditures in the other, compared to what our budget shows, actual monthly, with a hard net profit, net loss. That's the red line. And as you can see, at December, we had a hard $85,000 deficit. Now, it's not a real deficit because I know that I didn't get December's state revenues in.
You can't accrue for those?
Well, that's what I'm doing in the middle. And if you look at the bottom, adjusted, that gray, that white line, I'm adjusting, and I've actually got $140,000 profit as of December when I do all the accruing and all the adjusting. At the end of the day, the first 3 months, we're doing good. Now, if you multiply that out, 140 times 4, there's our $500,000 we're trying to set aside for the fund balance every year.
So you pulled that money going into the fund balance is not included in these budgeted numbers, or is that is that $140,000 in excess beyond
Excess.
So it's 500 more than the 500.
Yes, because now you look at the bottom, our ending fund balance with 11/12 is going to be right around $1,863,000, and so as of December, we're now going to go up $2 million because of that 140.
That begs the question: why was our budget so far off then?
Well,
I mean, it's off to the good, but still, it's...
Well, that's revenue, that's extra revenues that came in. For instance, planning and zoning today, as of the end of January, they have collected 100% of their revenue at $70,000
For the year.
What about
for the year.
on the expense side?
The expense side, they've held
But I mean,
serve.
we're 55,000...
Well, realize we got some expenses that'll be hitting, and we feathered that, but this is realized, and also, you run the run rate on our PST and our CST, and we're over collecting what we budgeted.
Well, let me answer that real
Not
quick.
by a lot, but by some, and you add all these up, also, you know, realize we don't know at the end of the day how some of these funds we get from the state come in, so, you know, we projected this, and then sometimes they come in a little over. So that's what I'm saying. It's not that we've underspent necessarily, because he checked today, and a lot of that is revenues that's come in over so far.
What I'm saying, in an ideal world, both those would be close to zero.
No, but here's why. How do you go from a deficit of 82,000 in expenditures to a positive 84? Well, because we paid all of our
Right.
insurance for 1 year all up front. And that's in the negative 82.
Right, but I'm saying
I'm
is,
prorating it out on the other number to see that we're gonna, as we get through the end of the
the
year.
adjusted one,
Yes.
in an ideal world, both of those would be zero.
Well,
That means we budgeted,
no.
we
No.
budget was right on target.
Well, let me say though that, let's take for instance state revenues. The state meets every month, they have their revenue estimating conference, and when the revenues start upticking, you know, this is a result of revenues coming in excess of what you budgeted. I don't really know that there is a way that you can be accurate enough in an economy where things decline and rise to ever really shoot for zero. So then you need to decide, do I want to err on the side of caution and conservatism, or do I want to err on the side of, we could spend more money than we really?
Now,
Let me rephrase what I said then.
I know
In
what
an ideal world, they would have been zero.
in an ideal world, but understand this. This is something we implemented last year.
Our budget was perfect, and there was no variables.
There were no variables. This is something we implemented last year. What this gives us is, there was nothing, when Greg and I talked last year about, there was nothing that said, I said, how do we stand? Where do we stand today? Well, do this, no, how do we stand today? I want something that says, what is my bottom line every month? Where do I stand all along this process? Not just month to month, but, you know what I mean, year to date, et cetera. That's how we came up with this. It's not easy. Greg worked on it and has manipulated it, but at the end of the day, it gives us a good picture. Now, what you may see next month is that 140, that 140 will be the 120. It'll be around the 90, 80, because it's according to how these revenues are hitting. What I think you ought to be looking at me and saying is, you need to try to hold that 140, because you know what I mean. I'm trying to hold expenses where I can collect more of this revenue and get it up there so I can get my cash position better.
And let me clarify what Randy and you were saying about it should be zero. If we had fund balance, if our fund balance was at policy levels, and next year's budget, you didn't want to build fund balance, that line should be zero, because our revenues are going to equal our expenses.
If you knew,
We're trying to build fund balance. How do you
That's
build
right.
fund balance? Your revenues exceed your expenses.
Well, that's what I asked earlier, is the expense of building the reserve built into your
Oh, I'm
expenditure?
sorry, I misunderstood.
No, that 140 is building that reserve.
That's
So,
going to reserve.
so it's not, we're not going to have 500 plus 500 more.
No, that's right. That's right. That's your real reserve. I'm sorry, I misunderstood. That's your real reserve that we're building.
Perfect, yes.
Okay, and now we're back on track.
Yeah.
That's right. Sorry about
Glad
that.
I wasn't alone on that.
No.
Okay. So that's the general fund. And what we do every month is we look at the fine and forfeiture fund the same way. And of course, this was as of December, where we were thinking we were going to have a positive. Well, obviously now, as we do January and February, that's going to totally change. And so that's why we do this every month. The road department is the next one. I don't think we have any questions on the sheriff's fund. We've already beat that one up, so unless you do. Road department is the next one. Again, we're trying to not build fund balance necessarily, but pull ourselves out of the hole and then start building fund balance, and we're on our way to doing that in the road department. And then you have the fire department, which is in a good position as well. It's similar to the building department. And the chief's here, he's probably beating me up over this, but this is one of those similar things. Do you reduce the MSBU? Well, no. We went up because we knew we had some capital costs that we needed to build up to go spend, and that's budgeted to do this year. Now, how you do it and what you do is another issue, but this fund was intended to build large sums of reserve because a ladder truck costs $500,000. And so this isn't the kind of fund where you look at it and say, oh, we got way too much cash, because we know those expenditures will decimate this fund very quickly.
Is there a misplaced decimal point on the adjusted revenue expenses smooth? So it goes to 2 million. You start the actual monthly average was 222,000. It goes to 2 million, showing a $445,000 deficit.
I'll have to look at that.
I don't think they're losing that much money.
Well, but see, what this might be is that, again, your MSBU comes in on your ad valorem tax revenues, and so had we collected everything, and that's the adjustment that gets made. So, and of course, when you're going to lose money here, you're forecasted to lose money because you're going to spend fund balance on your building.
Right.
Yes.
I was just going to say that I think that revenue of the mortgage, for lack of a better term, of the new building is included in that.
Yes, and
It hasn't been spent, that was just...
That's correct.
That's working on the assumption that we go ahead and build.
That's right, because that's what's in the budget.
Okay.
Yes.
And borrow the money.
Then you have 1 cent sales tax. Again, we've got a lot of capital purchases built into this, and so you see a forecasted loss, but it's the spending down of all your 1 cent sales tax as our 5-year plan is built. Sewer fund.
At least it's not losing money, right?
Yeah, we're turning it around, and as David mentioned, if we get this USDA thing going, this is going to look even better.
Yeah, this got a shot. We get this USDA loan program. It'll be I think we can put a bow around this one for a long time.
How does getting a loan to expand the wastewater plant help our bottom line?
Because currently we've got 3 large loans that we're trying to pay for that without the bump from, we'll be getting a serious negative if we don't get that bump in fees from Shell Point. If we didn't get that, we would be in the negative next year.
We're not actually, it's going to be a higher dollar amount, it's just the payments.
Think about loan consolidation.
Right. Plus we can get a grant.
That's what you're doing.
Yeah,
It's a loan grant
if we say we don't want to borrow that money, we all of a sudden lose about $3 million.
Right, but
Right.
we'll still owe.
You'll still owe, but also, we'll owe it over the next 30 years. That's right.
Refinancing.
That's right. And we're refinancing, but that's the only way it works. Now, just to go out and borrow the money to build the expansion and keep paying what we're doing, there ain't no way we can do it.
Right.
No way in God's green earth.
Now, see, 5 years ago, when we had all the access fees flowing in and everybody
No problem.
right and left, there was no problem.
That's right.
You could afford the P&I
That's right.
based on that.
And that's the way, in theory, what was supposed to have worked, I'm sure, in which everybody did it, was you borrowed money and you paid it back. Your payback was based on growth and based upon that nut. So you overbuilt your plant to be able to absorb that growth, and they paid it back with access fees, and you can't do that. You can't do that anymore. So what we're hoping to do is this will fix it to where we can actually pay for the expansion out of some access fees, but also out of the operating fees. And like you're saying, Dr. Kessler, everywhere we can fix our revenue issues, such as idle facilities sitting there not being charged, that gets us better and better.
What was the difference in price? I know the board said we're not going to AWT
Right.
on the sewer plant. What was the actual difference in price between doing that?
It was I can't give you an exact dollar amount. We talked to the engineers about that this week. They were talking, Brent, what was the percentage they were talking? 8 million with 8WT.
Don't you have to do additional staffing too?
Yeah, I know it pulled it down to around $4 or $5 million to plant expansion. About a $3 million hit to do AWT. Plus, operational costs were higher.
Okay. Well, I'm just, keeping that potential BP money in mind, and, when and if this sewer plant, we might want to leave it open to change gears.
Yes, sir, and you're exactly right. Because at the end of the day, what cures this fund altogether is the BP fund. That takes care of that, and then we don't have to, we need to pay back our USDA loan, or what I'd like to be able to do is drag as long as I can to hopefully get the BP dollars in here that can pay for it, and we don't have to go through the loan program.
Good.
Last one, not last one, then you have the water fund. You have a projected loss here because you're going to paint the water tower. That's substantially part of it. Any questions on that?
This fund will be all right after this year. It's all right now, but it should chug along.
And then the last one, solid waste.
Now, the reason this is showing a forecasted net loss of 367, Greg,
Is you're spending that $500,000 that's set aside
Right.
for closing. And so if you think about it, you're spending $500, but you're only losing 367. So without that activity, you're turning this around. And of course, then we have to borrow the other portion.
and what we're using that 500,000 on is all the engineering, test, all that stuff to get ready for that.
And that's the last one on the current year. We only look at those high dollar key funds on a monthly basis. Long-term debt, I don't know if you can read that or not.
It's the extravagant courthouse renovations that happened. Our Taj Mahal of Wakulla County.
He left, didn't he?
He left. Darn it.
He has perfect timing.
That's scary. That is eerie.
David, I thought the Northwoods was like the Brook Forest and the Tupelo Ridge, where we passed that off to their, as an assessment on their ad valorem taxes, right?
We did, but we still have to make the payment.
Why
We
is
still,
the Brook
we still
Forest
have to
on
make the
there?
payment.
Who's picking it up?
Brook Forest isn't. We paid Brook Forest and Tupelo off.
Northwoods is the only one we haven't paid.
See, we paid, the county went ahead and paid them off because we were going into
With what?
negative, but they still owe us money.
Paid them off with what? What is it, sales tax?
No, with road dollars,
Road paving dollars, okay.
which is not supposed to happen.
No.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
It's your idea.
It was definitely.
Well, okay.
We were losing money every year.
I understand.
And so we're paying, we figured what's worse, pay it off now or just keep losing money because of all the interest that we're accruing.
I understand.
So,
Are they still paying us?
yes, it's on the assessment now.
So they have to
and,
pay us now,
we're
it's
getting
not
repaid.
voluntary.
We'll be made whole. and it'll
So
take a couple
could we
years.
apply the same logic to Northwoods then, since it's 6.5% interest?
They're paying all of that, aren't
We
they?
haven't paid that loan off, right?
We haven't paid it off.
No, but isn't Northwest
They're paying
Northwoods?
it, yeah.
But aren't they paying the assessment of the 7% in there as well?
So see, the county's not
they're carrying
losing
it.
money on interest now because Northwoods they're picking that tab.
They're paying their
Yeah,
interest.
different from the other
And that
two
was the
setups,
question.
right?
Why are we paying 6.5% interest on that loan?
Well, they are actually.
Yeah,
They are.
they are. That's the time it was set up.
The county can't go out and borrow dollars for a private project. So we would be able to get a cheaper rate. That's the rate they charge Northwoods. So you have up top, you have all of your note payables, and then of course the sewer. There's two loans in there. Both of those were expansions. One a long time ago with Bank of America, and then the most recent one with the state revolving loan on the Oyster Bay transfer line.
If we could get that Bank of America one paid off, that would be a
Well,
big
that's correct.
deal.
That's correct. And then now you have some capital operating leases, which most of those will be paid off very soon. The next slide just carries it out, and what we have is we have a long-term debt schedule going out all the way to 2022. I don't know if I'll still be here then, but somebody will have a long-term debt schedule going out that far. And you see when everything gets paid off. So that's how we schedule our budget for our long-term debt.
The difference on the road paving in 13-14 is about $400,000.
That's right, and that's when it gets that's when that one loan gets paid off, and that's why you saw a bump up in capital that year of being able to pave some roads in the following year. We'll be able to put on pavement what was going to Bank of America. So that's that. And then this was something that I recently did. As I said, GASB issues standards, if you will, for what's a good debt ratio. Well, they won't tell you. They won't give you a number and say, you should maintain X percentage. What they do, though, if you read the explanation, tell you that you should be watching your debt service ratio, and if that ratio is increasing over time, what that means is that you have what they call inflexibility. It would be like you overextending yourself privately in your personal loans. You can maybe make the payments, but if the washer goes out, you can't fix it. So you have some inflexibility the more you borrow. And
Debt
everybody
service,
understands that.
is this principal and interest versus Inc.?
This is principal only. Principal only.
If mine was that good, I'd be doing good with that.
Right, and so what you have is going back to 0304, we had a 38% debt service ratio, and what GASB tells you to do is compare your total debt to your total expenses, and that's the denominator or numerator denominator. And we are down now, we're budgeted to be down to 13%, which is excellent. Now, you look down, there's also some scheduled borrowing in the current year, which will bump that back up. And how much we borrow and what we borrow on will be up to y'all, but that's based on the budget. The $1 million for the fire EMS, the $1 million for the landfill, and the USDA sewer plant, which is a net. It's an $8 million borrowing, roughly, but we'll be paying off about 2-point-something million.
It's 11 million and about net out about 8 million.
But because part of it's going to
Yeah,
be
you're right,
grant,
you're right,
but
you're
then
right,
we're
you're
going to be
right,
paying
you're right.
off some of this debt.
That's right.
And
So
consolidating.
the net to this is about 5 million.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's right.
and all washes will be 5.
We'll be about 5.
So you're going to pay off both the revolving loan fund
Yes.
and the
Bank of
old
America.
grant, the
That's
extension
right.
grant?
So the net to this schedule would be about a $5 million bump up.
What would the net savings be on the payoff? And
$300,000 a year.
and then we pick up another 300 in 13-14 because of the Bank of America.
Well, that's the road loan, though.
That's the road.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll be getting progressively, if we get through this year and we do what we're planning to do, we'll be getting progressively better from the sewer and the road and the 1 cent sales tax.
Now what I've tried to do is, if we pull the trigger on all 3 of those borrowings, over here, under the first 2 columns, you'll see that based on the 12-13 budget, our ratio goes back up to about 30%.
And so how long does that stay?
Well, it changes every year
It-
as you pay things off.
Yeah,
Depends on
okay.
your total expenses.
It drops according to what we pay off, which is 13-14, we drop quite a bit there and so forth.
Correct. And then I've tried to illustrate that in chart form. Your blue line is your total debt service amounts. You see it going down over time. Total expenditures. Now, the problem is total expenditures includes everything. Capital purchases, grants. So, for example, and this is where you have to be careful. If we got $20 million from restore money,
You're at like 2%.
it totally throws off your debt service ratio, and so you have to take that into account as well. It's not an absolute number. You have to do some tweaking to it. But
Now, one of the things we're going to want to do is, especially on the sewer loan, is if building picks back, or when building picks back up to a good, consistent level, and we've got access fees coming in at a more consistent level, what I want to try to do is buy down this principal every year as much as we can with those access fees, paying the regular nut out of operating, but then every year be able to carve some of the access fees off, that we're not spending in maintenance, carve some of that off, and every year try to pay some of the nut off, some of that principal, so that eventually we get that. If Restore Act doesn't come or all this stuff, eventually we can. Because what needs to happen is in theory the way it was supposed to have happened was as you're paying this loan off, your capacity is filling up and you're reaching your capacity, and in theory you get at capacity and your loan's paid off at the same time, then you borrow some more money and you build the next capacity, and it should in theory but now we're upside down. That's not happening. So what we need to do is try to get it back to that, to where we're not having to, we're not upside down. We've got to try to level the playing field again.
If building does come back, and I always said I would be willing to reinstitute the impact fee whenever the building came back, at least what I thought was fair. Could that impact fee then be used to do debt service on some of these, like the firehouse, for example? Could you use you couldn't use impact fees to make any of these payments?
Is it just capital projects?
I mean, I guess if you're overbuilding fire and you have built-in capacity, you could perhaps prorate some of those.
We've been talking about we want to build it for 20 years in the future, over capacity. And my thought is, again, if the building came back and we had a $200 per house impact fee, just for whatever, EMS,
you could for any capacity portion.
Maybe we could use that to help make some of these payments. I mean, the sewer has the impact fee, which is the access charge.
Why don't we think about, since you brought up the possibility of coming and look at those impact fees before building takes off, and so that we're ready for it.
I've got all that presented. I presented it at the board meeting. I'll be happy to give to you. When I went and looked at it.
Yeah, that's good. All right.
I'll just put the whole packet in your... Well, actually, you have it, don't you?
I have the packet.
All my math work and all that stuff?
I was holding it pursuant to board direction, but I can certainly I should probably make a copy of it so we don't have originals floating around.
Great, thank you.
One I couldn't figure out was law enforcement, because it changed so much.
Yeah.
Greg, it looks like we're looking at a different page than you have.
Oh, I did, and I meant to mention this. What I did not include on your slide, I had not included the $5 million net on the USDA effect when I initially did this, so I apologize. This is different, and I can get you a copy of this. I think that's the only change on this entire presentation, is that this one page, you should be looking at, what, $2 million in that additional borrowing, in that line?
Mm-hmm.
It should be 7.3 based on our rough estimates of what the USDA is going to do. I meant to mention that when we started, but I forgot. Any other questions on this slide? Getting back to sort of, I guess, the idea of priorities, the capital improvement plan, we sort of look at it from the immediate term to short term, then short term to long term, and then state mandates. And I've just summarized very roughly some of these things. Obviously, as David's pointed out, we've got to maintain some of our buildings with roofs and AC units. That's built into our 5-year plan. And then vehicle replacement cycling, whether that's the sheriff's office for ambulances or fleet vehicles for road. We have replacement schedules, and we're trying to meet those as best as possible.
Again, most of those paid for with 1 cent sales tax money, not ad valorem tax.
Or gas tax or something like that, yes. Now, and Jessica can elaborate on this a little bit, but she sent me what y'all approved in board priorities on 2.5, which is just recently, and that was these things. So to me, obviously those fall right in line with everything that we have in our 5-year plan. Highway improvements to 319, sewer and wastewater upgrades, and then the bike trail. All of that is already essentially in our plan. Obviously, what needs to be in there, we don't have the funding for fully, but this is on our radar, and you set that roughly. State mandates, I think we've talked about all of these. The closure, or it's already closed. We shouldn't say closure.
Right.
We're capping the landfill. DEP is mandating that, and that's 1.5 million. We have a $500,000 on hand. We will borrow the one.
And we're also
We don't have a
replacing,
choice about that.
we're also replacing lift stations. That probably should be up there on the,
Oh, yes. Yes, I'll add that. The old jail, fuel contamination, we mentioned that. It's about $750,000. And the requirement, DEP obviously is requiring us to upgrade the sewer plant. Is that 11 million, did you say now? I need to.
It's 11 million total package, yeah. But then grants and, bring back off of that.
Would be a net of about, what, 8?
About 8 is what I'm thinking it'll probably end up being.
So,
we're at the point where because of our flows at the plant, we have to plan for expansion, we have to move forward with it, correct?
Hmm?
We're at the point with the flows at the plant where we have to plan for expansion and move forward.
Yeah. We've kicked that all we can, so. DEP is like, they gave us the approval to move forward gave us some limited flow as long as when we applied for the USDA, they went, okay, now we see you're doing something, we'll go ahead and allow you to have that last little bit of flow.
So on the short-term or long-term goals and approved by the BOCC, when we speak about the 5-year plan, is this it, or is 5-year plan have other things in it that we are?
Oh, it's got a whole lot of things in it, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
we went over that earlier.
Yeah.
The long
Yeah.
slides, yeah.
Oh,
I just tried to summarize your conceptually your priorities.
That's right.
Now, we talked about all the DOT grants on paving all of these different roads. We went through that slide earlier. Obviously, much of that is dealing with the highway corridor and intersection improvements along 319.
so is that easily spelled out in there?
No.
Okay,
So
so,
5-year plan, I guess, is what they were showing. It's not necessarily a 5-year capital improvement plan, I guess
Well, it's operational and capital
That's the
improvement, but
CPI increasing 2% a year.
you've got to get down into the spread. It's all in spreadsheet format. It's what it is.
Then there's another big plan on 11 by 17 paper that the board adopted, which is an infrastructure plan.
Right, right.
so is that electronic? Can we get that electronically?
The infrastructure plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got to remember where I put it.
And it's not going to be some spectacular, it's a bunch of pretty pictures, and here's the things that we want to do.
Oh, you're talking about that? Yeah, I'll give you a copy of it in paper, and I'll give it to you. We can give it to you electronically.
Yeah, so every time we speak about the 5-year,
Well, it's really two different things. A 5-year plan is what they put together, assuming such much increase in health insurance each year, this much in property tax values. They did that to show if we cut the millage rate to 7 mills this year, here's what it'll look like 5 years from now.
okay,
That's the 5-year plan.
okay, that's what they're talking about here, okay. Then the other thing is this infrastructure
Which is
plan.
much more general. It just says,
And that's-
I'd like to
is that
have-
also referred to as a 5-year plan at one
No,
time?
sir.
No.
That's the infrastructure plan.
Well, here's the thing, and I think this is where I made the mistake. You go back to this slide, I probably should not have called this the 5-year plan. That's an infrastructure plan. See, all that's capital. And so I probably made a mistake in what I titled this slide, because it says 5-year plan. Well, this doesn't have anything to do with operating, personnel, or nothing. This is capital purchases in a 5-year plan. So I probably made a mistake in communicating
Well, I
that.
just want to get it clarified, thank you.
Because that does have like the soccer complexes in that.
Yeah, that's what I want to say.
But it doesn't, that also has replacing an AC unit, which is not in the infrastructure plan.
Correct. You have capital versus equipment, and
Trucks,
And okay. And that's, is that, as you understand it, a sort of a fluid thing, sort of a guide? It's like
The infrastructure plan definitely is a guide.
Okay.
You look at it's a book. It's a bunch of pretty pictures. We'd like to have sidewalks. We'd like to have our beach. We'd like to have new boat ramps. Just things we'd like to have. It was made for BP, basically.
Okay. And any of the, anytime we'd want to go ahead with something like that, then it would come back to
Exactly.
the board for,
Just like this soccer complex, it has specifically 2 years from now we're going to allocate
Right.
X amount of dollars.
Right.
On the lift stations, we're going to allocate X amount of dollars this year.
good, thanks.
Yeah, and the 5-year plan is a management tool, and that's what it's there for. Your infrastructure plan is like you said, but the 5-year plan is a tool to try to help us manage the county. And
It's a budgeting tool.
it's a budgeting tool.
Budgeting spreadsheet.
And also it's if we see, for instance, if the economy, we get headwind, says the economy's going to be tanking like it did before, we can come back and drill in there and say, based on historic numbers, here's the likely effect, and here's where we're going to stand.
If you don't cut now,
That's right. If you don't do something now, here's what's going to happen.
There's a capital element to the 5-year plan.
That's right. That's right.
And if it's in the 5-year capital plan, we put a hard dollar to the estimated cost, whereas your infrastructure plan, it's a pretty picture.
Right, but they also work together. Is anything that goes into the capital plan for the 5-year plan, we offset that. If it's an increase, say for instance we were building another building, we would go back into the year that we finished that building in the 5-year plan. We bump our expenses up because we got to maintain that facility. We got to pay electricity on that facility. So we corresponded your capital plan with your expense, saying you can't keep improving capital without it. You've got to increase your expenses to cover whatever you're building. So it all corresponds, and it helps us get all that in together, and so it's something that we were pretty good at it last year. We're going to get better at it this year, and hopefully we can get this thing down to get it pretty accurate.
So I have one other question, and I guess not with this workshop, but we had talked about a priorities workshop. Is that still to come? Has that been scheduled? Where do we stand with that?
That's something we can talk about today, and we can definitely move forward. We can use the rest of the afternoon to talk about priorities.
well, the rest of the afternoon is about an hour and a half till 5. I mean, it's just something we want to do separate from the budget. My thought today was that we'd say, here's what I think the millage rate needs to be going forward. I want general ideas just for them to try to prepare a budget, right, David? That's what we did last year.
Yeah, that's part of it, but also
I like that.
to help start setting that.
I like that, and to try to stay focused on this thing. And I'd also like, when we do have a priorities meeting, and hopefully we can set this up as soon as possible, that the other commissioners are aware of it so they can come in prepared with, their ideas on priorities.
Now, of course, priorities change depending on if we get BP money, of course. If,
Well, yeah, the priorities are the priorities, and then whether we can do them or not may change. Whether we get
well, maybe it's and when you say priorities, you mean it's related to the infrastructure plan, or
when I say priorities, and where I'm going with this whole thing is, instead of chipping away with, okay, here's a project that comes to the board meeting, the next meeting, and we say we're going to spend some money on that. Before we keep on going ahead like that, to really throw everything on the table that there is and try to see where they fall out, at least with the opinion of the board, on what are the most important things. We may find out that we have nothing more to do after we take care of the immediate infrastructure problems, and that ends the rest of the thing. But at least we go through the exercises as if we had some relief, and those funds become available. Where do we go with
that infrastructure plan? Then is definitely a good start. And probably once we're all familiar with that, because it has, everything in the world for projects. Because it was a pie in the sky. He gave us $1 billion. What will we spend it on?
Exactly.
So there a lot of even oddball things are spelled out in there.
It would seem to me that basically, instead of trying to establish new priorities, that we should try to solve the priorities that we have here today.
Well, it's really two separate issues, really. One is the budget.
Right. One is the necessities that we have to do, and they would fall right at the top of the priority list,
That's covered pretty good. The soccer complex, that's a half priority. I guess it's been budgeted for, right, David?
Yeah, sort of, yeah. We've got some funds in there for
Down
that.
the road.
Down the road. Yeah, and that's something that, and you're right. I mean, we don't have funds enough to have a whole ton of priorities outside of basic infrastructure. And, I think everything we brought to y'all basically has been base infrastructure. We haven't brought you that much to talk about. So, but one of the things that we are going to be doing, and based upon, I understand it wasn't y'all's budget, it was the previous board's budget, but based upon, to be honest with you, meeting last week with about the community center on Monday, and seeing where we're at with the sheriff's stuff with the Department of Corrections. Greg and I, we're going to try to get together. We're going to get together next week after we get our February numbers in. But we're going to go back through here and look at our 1 cent sales tax. Look at what also I'm going to be talking next week to some architects as well as I talk to Sperry some more about the possibility of what we can do to really build some streamlined buildings even further. And we were going to do that anyway, but go ahead and talk about that and come back to you guys with maybe a new set of priorities that basically takes the 1 cent sales tax and shuffles the deck and says, based on the rest of the year, what do y'all think about this? Option A, option B, and option C. I'm not going to give you 7. So, but you see what I'm saying? Because right now y'all could set the priorities, and it will help you set those priorities. But right now, we need to see where we're standing based upon everything that's been passed so far.
That priority has a very wide range of cost, I guess is what you're trying to say.
That's right. It has a very wide range of cost.
$100,000, it could be $10 million.
Now, what I want to do is sit down with each one of y'all, and as we get further into this, just like I did with the community center plan, and say, here it is, what do you think, what do you want, like Dr. Kessler, what do you think the priorities should be? So I may have 5 priority lists, and one for each commissioner.
I just think basically that we have a plate full to add priorities to what we have a whole basket full of priorities right here that maybe we can't.
Yeah, and these are the bigger things I'm talking about, like the buying of trucks. We got to replace those. We're hemorrhaging money on old trucks.
Well, we can't figure out about spending more money. We can't figure to spend more money. Our priorities are to try to solve this money problem.
That's right.
Not create more priorities.
No, I understand that.
I've been to a couple of last 2 years. I've been to our priority conferences, and they were sort of funny. They didn't solve. We just wound up having conversation, but we didn't.
Wish list that we can't afford.
We got a wish list. That's an infrastructure problem.
Right. And I just say stay with what we've got and see if we can work our way through with where we are.
I thought we all agreed that Wakulla Garden Sewer would be a priority, but
well, those are things that we already. Those are things that we already know. We sort of know what we need.
we'll address that another day.
Well, like I say, we're gonna, based on the conversation, we're gonna shuffle the deck a little bit and bring that back to you guys.
I would just like to say, I think we're probably tying up here. Every time I've talked to David, is almost that, bring us on grant people. Bring us on grant people. Get people here who can find us money.
Yes, sir.
Just really bring us on grant people. You did mention now that the grant person that we just brought on has saved us a bunch of money. Can you sort of tell us about that?
Well, she basically, what she did is we gave her this, after we found out about the USDA grant, we had some of the information together from a long time ago, but she took it on herself to grab it and said, I told her, I said, it's probably too late because we had a deadline in January to hit, January 28th, and realized it normally takes about an engineering firm about 6 months to apply for this grant. She did it in 4 weeks.
And she came from Tallahassee,
and let me tell you, Miss Susan Fleming, she did with the help of ESG and Kimley Horn, but still, at the end of the day, she coordinated it all. She hit all the right buttons. She talked to all the right people. She did all the things that a good grant person does.
What firm was this?
Kimley Horn.
The other one with our interviews.
That's right, that's right. And all that was gratis from Kimley Horn, by the way. But still, she coordinated. At the end of the day, we stand to have saved by her efforts $3 million, as well as get this fund fixed for the long term. But that's the value of having a good quality person in that position, like you were talking about, Dr. Kessler.
And how can we afford not to put another person on?
Well, and that's
That wasn't an employee.
yeah.
Yeah,
I know.
it was.
Yeah, Susan Fleming's our employee.
Oh, that girl.
Yeah,
Woman,
lady.
I'm sorry.
Lady. Yes, lady.
That's what I was saying. Kimley Horn.
Kimley Horn, all she did is Kimley Horn, they got some baseline, they got some data, but she was the one that was,
You can tell I don't hang out at the board office.
she was the puppeteer.
What I'm saying is that the cost to do that grant, you know, we can't afford not to have more people who are, let's say, as good as that person scrambling for these grants, because that's $3 million, that pays salaries forever.
Well, here's my plan, and if we get the Restore Act dollars, what I want to do is I actually want to step up even further. I want to step our grant programs up.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
And the reason being is all of a sudden we go from having no cash match to having match. Okay? So that means we can start going after more and more and more grants. Right now we go after grants that we can either have no match or, now we are going after one that does have some match because we got 1 cent sales tax. But now we can start going after grants. If we get that money, we got grants now, we can start matching with Restore Act dollars and doubling or tripling our dollars. So where hopefully we can take our Restore Act dollars and spread it over the next however many years.
From the standpoint of, let's just call it our grant department, to have a...
And I think you're right, because ultimately I think where this plays into is, like, we need to have a grant department that has got all the grants coming through it so that, the TDC don't have to, they can say, here's a grant we want you to run after. And we controlling it, we're making sure it's being paid right, we're applied for right, that it's being closed out correctly, accounted for correctly, and all that stuff. And we'll get there, but I'm not saying we've got to get there tomorrow, but eventually get down the line where we can get there.
You want to move on to
Talking about millage?
Huh?
Talking about millage?
Yeah, let's,
I didn't know how much time you wanted to spend. That's what this slide was for, if you had time, and I don't know.
well, let's talk about some, a few things. Get the board's feelings on this. We had factored in that the employees have not had a raise now or any type of cost of living adjustment, for the past, since 2009, and basically the budget was balanced on the back of these employees, and it's time. You got to take care of your people, because the good news is we got some good quality people that are able to do 2 and 3 tasks that they're not necessarily assigned to do, but they've picked up the slack, and we really this year and the years out, I want to try to start giving some type of increase, because we can't continue to keep continue to keep the same level of service we've got if we don't take care of our people. We're going to start losing talent. As the economy gets better, we will lose talent, and that costs us money, because if we lose a good person, sometimes you have to replace that person with a person and a half or 2 persons. Therefore, we got to take care of our people.
get too in-depth into your priorities that were on here. Do you have a way to pay for it without raising the millage rate?
That's the reason we're asking for direct. We want, yes, as of right now, we have a plan to come about to where we can afford this, as long as a couple of things don't happen, as long as our insurance doesn't go sky high, as long as the state doesn't, we don't get some of these bumps in the roads that we're talking about. If the sheriff's department thing collapses, then you're right. We're back to square one. I understand that. I'm saying if we don't have any terrible things, and Donnie doesn't come back at the end of the day and say it's 5% down, our property values are 5% down, as long as he doesn't come back and he says, like we talked, it's going to be either level or just a tick below where we're at.
Below is what he's saying.
That's right. Well, the good news is remember last year we didn't use the roll-up rate.
Okay, now how?
So if we could have served. Now, why we would do it is we wouldn't reserve as much, because number one, we're already getting close to our reserve number, And this would allow us to slow the reserve funding down, because in theory, we could still get there in our 5-year program, even carving off a piece of that to give to the employees.
To boil it down then.
That's
This
right.
year, according to this budget, which we're on track for, we're putting $500,000 to reserve. Next year, we're probably gonna be at least $200,000 down on revenue.
But but, now, hold on. Remember last year, we was 137,000, wasn't that what we didn't use the roll-up rate, Greg?
That's correct.
137,000, so if we stay, that's what I'm saying, I think the property tax, at the end of the day, Donnie Smart, I think we're gonna net out. We'll net out to where we can stay about where we are this year. And if that's the case,
Johnny's down to say something.
Don't put in contract with you on the French. Right now, we're down, my little thought tax dollars, we're down about 225. It's about 2.25%. Realistically, with what I know about the, personal property didn't come in April. We're gonna be looking at, I'm gonna say 3%, 3 and 4 down, which is gonna put you in the $300,000 range in tax dollars.
Okay, so we gotta pay for $300,000 in lost revenue. We gotta pay for employee cost of living increases. We gotta pay for the
How
health.
much? Do we have that number?
Well, just
what was that increase, Greg?
I don't have.
We don't have that with us.
Running it out. And then the health insurance, that's gonna go up. Everything else. And not raise the millage rate and not raise any other taxes. And we may put zero to reserve then, is that what you're saying?
I won't bring you one that puts zero to reserve, but the reserves won't be as high as they are now.
And that's with keeping the PST at 7%.
That's right.
Keeping 8.5 mils. And then hopefully, what you're thinking is hopefully next year, if we have another decrease next year.
Have another decrease next year, then we gotta make some further changes.
But you're hoping is that next year it'll level out.
Yes, hoping next year, if it'll level out.
I thought we'd be level this year until the new construction turns around. You're not going to see it.
Right.
Now, I'm hearing from Rod and things that permits are picking up. See, what I'm looking at, what went on last year. So anything is taken place at the end of 12, we won't see it to the following year. So
Right.
you may see us at least be level. I don't see how property values can go down much more unless y'all will start paying the economy.
Well, that is personally fine with me. Is my 2 cents on it. I just assume keep the millage rate at 8.5, keep the PST where it's at. Your plan, the employee thing, I know that's kind of a goal for some people, but it has been a long time, and we were just exulting about how good employees are doing about getting all these grants and stuff, and you want to keep good people, and nothing's been done for them since 2009, and it's a modest increase, I guess.
You've actually taken away from those
I think we can
employees.
cut, is what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
Well, we've already cut our numbers substantially. We've cut our expenses substantially. And I understand there's a point as to how low you can go. As long as we're not raising taxes, I'll leave it up to you as to how we spend the money.
I've always advocated that I think people just want their money spent fairly, and I heard something on NPR the other day about the Congress that they should stop focusing on cutting and start focusing on managing. That's kind of
Efficient
what
spending.
Yes, efficient spending, exactly.
And that's where I think we are, and like I say, I wouldn't have brought it to y'all if I didn't think it was important, because, like I say, your people are your best asset, and also they're where your efficiency is going to be. We start losing talent, we're going to lose efficiency.
If we were in an increasing property tax world, this would be 100 times easier.
I understand that, but like I say, at the end of the day, that may only be 0.5% when we bring a budget back to you.
I think you're going to be surprised how soon this economy will start coming back in a hurry, because I know from other places, and you're in real estate, or you were in real estate, but developers now are beginning to buy blocks of lots. They were, for the past 5-6 years, they hadn't bought anything, but I know in other areas they're buying blocks of lots now. They're getting ready to move. Now, of course, if interest rates, if this low interest rate that we have, if it moves, then that could put another damper on where we are. So that's an unknown. And you can't do your plan. You can't do your, yeah.
Which is good for the banks, because they make some
Well,
money now.
I used to sell real estate at 18%, but people today will not buy at 4%. So we've been spoiled to having a 3.5% rate. So if they go to 4 or 5, I don't know, maybe they will, but I think I think it'll come back.
Well, I mean, from reading a lot of the economic indicators that I keep in touch with, both from a national as well as Florida, there's actually the property values, and Donnie can tell you this, that they're projecting in a lot of the counties in Florida, property values are starting to tick up now. Some of them are still falling, like Donnie's saying. There's some that have problems, but on average, they're starting to, across the nation, property values are starting to tick back up again.
You had, in Atlanta, you had a 45% increase, but now that was a 45% increase from what? From nothing.
From nothing, yeah. Everything up here should be uphill, so, but...
Ralph, what's yours?
When we're talking about,
3 years behind.
Right.
There's some counties in big cities up here that didn't see the decrease. They don't know what's going on. They just stayed where they were. So we're typically 2-3 years behind what's going on in South Florida. They're just starting to see some increase, but they're still having budget problems.
Well,
The increases from where it fell so far down.
That's right.
an increase from nothing.
Right.
Howard, go ahead.
yeah, when you're speaking of salary increases, are you speaking about just for the board employees?
Just for the board employees. Now, the constitutionals, they may have been given increases. What we factored in here was 2% across the board for all of them and all the funds.
Sheriff's Department,
and everything. But at the end of the day, they may have been given increases all along. I don't know that. Donnie just gave himself a 5% increase the other day, so I'm just kidding.
I don't think they have.
But yeah. So I would put in 2% across the board, but at the end of the day, what I'm speaking of is the folks within the BOCC.
There are a lot of crews there, but they typically will make us stay where you are,
Right.
stay us.
Right.
You say the employees have to have an increase in 7.5, but really, realistically, what they had got in 6 and 7 is taken away from them, from either the 3% retirement, the health insurance got added to them.
And the furloughs.
They come down to where they were below where they were before they got
Yeah, 2 years ago, they took half pay home.
And not every department took the furloughs.
That's right, not every department took the furloughs. So, I mean, that's the problem is this whole thing has been balanced on the back of the employees of this county.
Remind me how much the cost was for the furloughs, employee cost. How much salary did they give up?
Well, it was for about, I want to say, wasn't it about for 9 months? 9 months, and that was a day a week?
Day a week.
20%.
Clerk's office is probably still on furlough. They started at first, didn't they?
I was thinking 400,000, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's on up there. It's that's just too bad. It had to be done like that. But at some point in time, we cannot continue to beat and badger our employees, and we've got to recognize the asset that they are, because we can't do what we're doing in here without them being professional and implementing what they do. And right now, we have a very good staff.
Well, I don't know what you guys think, but as far as the furlough goes, we did the furlough, and then now we've got a $1.8 million reserve, which is good, but it's not great. I'd like to see us pay the money back that they furloughed, even if we have to do it over a several year period of time, because a lot of those folks that sacrifice that income, they're also property owners. They've paid it. They've paid the public service tax and the communication service tax and the ad valorem. I'd like to see us try to work that in there as a compensation back to them,
I think
because
the cost of living increase would be a good start. I don't know if he can pay. I don't know if I go along with you on that one.
I just feel that they would disproportionately pay.
I certainly don't expect to get paid back. I understand what you're saying,
Yeah, but you guys were in that decision-making seat, and they weren't. They had to deal with it.
And there's a big difference. This is your second job. This is their primary job.
I understand that.
Yeah.
I'm just using an example. I don't know if we can afford to pay back $400,000.
Right.
I just think we ought to at least look at it, because they were disproportionately paying more, than the average citizen, I believe.
If we were to do that, I don't think we should do it in this year. We could say that we will do it at a particular point, but I don't think we
Break it up over several years.
Well, I think we'd probably all be on board of looking at the cost of living increase, and that's basically what David's suggesting here, and that's a good start. And I think I'm going to try to familiarize myself with the salaries of the positions that we have, starting off at least with the BOCC, so I know what we're looking at. But I think that I tend to understand where Commissioner Thomas is coming from when he's saying those people really sacrificed, and they made a big difference in getting the county out of the hole that it was in. And but at the same time, we have to, I think, really understand, what those salaries are, and if we're on board with it. I think certainly a 2% cost of living, having not received one for quite a while, is a reasonable thing.
Let me say one more thing too. When talking about the budget, I think I asked Greg this one time, just when I met with Charlie Creel. Out of our 8.5 mills, how much is it? 7.5? 7.4 goes to the sheriff's department.
7.3 or something.
So anybody that's thinking about, we need to cut, we need to, whatever, we need to save money for this or that. I told Charlie this, and just being honest, I said to Charlie, they're talking about you. I mean, that's it. Everything else, and they say that they're cut as far as they can cut, and even with Charlie in there, new with fresh eyes on it, he still says that. Right?
Well, you all I can tell you is you look at the slide that y'all just come through with employees, and you'll see who is over the past 3 years who's absorbed the cuts. You can see that.
Yeah, and that's been true even in prior administrations. It's always been the board that has,
That's right.
The two elephants in the room, the board and the sheriff's office. But
Now,
who has historically taken the cuts has always been
It's
the
always
board.
the board. That's right.
So,
According to Mary Dean's figure she just gave us, so they did. I mean,
Well, that's the problem, is that Karen Day gave us the 167, correct, Brandy?
Correct.
Right.
And Mary Dean's given us 152.
At the last second, come back and say, whoa, wait just a
I
minute.
don't know the answer.
well, their budget, I just added up on the 12-13 budget. Their corrections in law enforcement is $9.9 million, which is more than we bring in all our ad valorem taxes. Now, I'm not saying that's money not well spent. People want to feel safe, and I'm personally willing to pay for that safety, and maybe everybody else is too. But I just don't, the public needs to know that, 1 mil or 1 point something mil, that's going to pay for everything else, including Donnie's office, Buddy's, the clerk, the parks, the ambulance, everything.
right, and there's grant money there and things like that as well. But, it's hard, it has been historically difficult to get consistent information from the office. Now we have a new sheriff, maybe things will be different, but it's been very difficult to get figures that correspond from one year to the other, if you get them. So it's hard to work with, and I don't think it's our job to be saying, here's what you need to cut from the sheriff's department. I think it's the sheriff's job, but I think it's our job to say, here's what your budget allowance is, you make it work. I think that's our responsibility. But right now, we're in this flux with this new system here. I don't know.
But at the end of the day, the sheriff's department's going to come to us. You're right, we're budget authority. He's going to say, I need the same amount of money. I've evaluated everything to keep the same level of public safety that we have now, I need the same amount of money, and we have to say yes, or we have to say no.
And we have to, and excuse me one second, we have to have if we feel what's best for the county is to say, we understand that. No one wants to be denied for fire or for law enforcement. We want to have a safe and secure environment. But we also have so many dollars, and we also know how we're taxing the people. And we have to put all those things in mind before we say always yes, which historically that has happened. So at times now we have to say no. Also in that, before I forget again, in that budget book, I don't know if it's been corrected with the forfeitures and whatever, but besides what historically has been labeled under the Sheriff's Department, there have been always things that we've picked up, whether it's Medicaid that sort of was in another fund, and I don't know if that's all now in the Sheriff.
We've taken care of all that.
It stands alone, and
that was the whole, that was, and Dr. Kessler, your evaluation of, even though I've been here a year and a half, I found that same thing. I couldn't get correct numbers that I trusted. So that was another reason of moving forward to that, saying, okay, we're going to put it all over here in one spreadsheet and in one fund. and I'm like you, if you've got, it's easier to make a decision when you know you can trust the numbers that are coming before you versus if you have doubt about those numbers.
And my position, I guess, on what you're saying is if, even though we're 8.5 mils is not going to bring in the same amount of revenue, I think it's fair to have the 8.5 mils and the PST where we have it. That funds them at the level they need to be, fine. Now, if they lose the prisoner funds or something, we talked about this a lot of times, something's got to give. And we can't cut $1 million out of Donnie's office and the Parks office and Buddy's office. Our budget's not that big. We don't have a $10 million budget.
Exactly.
And also the fine and forfeiture was set it up so that increases were going to come, instead of them coming to you and say, hey, I want a 5% increase this year. It gave them a revenue number every year from the ad valorem taxes. Here's your revenue you're going to get just like we get. If you set the ad valorem taxes at 8.5, or you set the millage rate at 8.5, we're going to get our 1 point whatever it is, 1.5, 1.7, they're getting the rest of it.
So
their increase,
percentage of the millage rate?
their increase, that's the way it's set up, so that at the end of the day, they've got to, like everybody else, they've got to live within what they are able to bring in. Versus coming to us and saying, you guys, I want a 5% increase, I don't care if you've got to cut 3% to get me my 5, they're set.
Let me just be sure we're talking about here first.
Yeah.
Let's say Donnie's right, we lose $300,000. Keeping it at 8.5 mils, we lose 300. Automatically, they're going to absorb about 220 of that.
That's right. Yes.
Because they're 80 to 90% of the millage rate.
That's right. That's right. It works both ways.
That's how we did it. We usually with the cuts. We'd say,
that's right. It works both ways. They get the increase, but they also get the decrease.
And the problem is, and I understand the good thing of getting it all under one, the problem is where you set that. And so you have this situation right now where it's set at 7 point something and we get the other. There was no way of really knowing if that was an inflated number or if that was the number that was really needed, and that's where the rub comes in.
Right.
well, now, like you said, there's nothing that was wrong with the last sheriff, but there is a fresh face that campaign. I hate to even bring that up about looking at everything hard, and I'm sure that's being done. And if he comes back and says, I've talked to all the staff, I've looked at everything, then the number they have was right. It's what we need to run what we feel is a adequate level of service. Then we have to either accept that.
Yesterday we had that very conversation. Randy and I had that very conversation with Sheriff Creel. That you got to look at everything, especially with this coming up. We know you've done it, but you've got to look at everything just like you walked in here today and you don't know anything, and how would you organize this thing?
And then what happens when, when things do turn around and that larger amount of millage is flowing in that one direction, and then we have to increase our staff in building or whatever we have to do in planning and zoning to accommodate the, when it was busy, we needed extra staff, we're going to be hard pressed to do it out of that one point.
It would still stay with it. You're talking about a larger number of dollars with the same percentage. The percentages stay the same. You get a percentage.
You
of
just
a
break it
larger
down in
amount.
raw numbers. I mean, they don't actually get 7.5 mils. I mean, if you break it down in raw numbers, I don't know the best way to word it. I understand what you're saying, but they're not going to get a huge. If our revenues go way up, they're not going to get a proportional increase in revenue. That's still up to us.
That's right. What y'all could do is if all of a sudden you get a spike in revenues, and you say, okay, we're going to keep, for instance, we're going to keep the millage at 8.5, but to fund some our programs, Sheriff, you've got a spike in increase in values. We're gonna lower your percentage down.
Yeah,
That you get now. You're going to get 7% versus 7.5%, and we're going to take that other 0.5% and bring it over here.
They're going
We
to
have the
come
ability-
back though and say
absolutely.
Okay, I thought that was...
an increase in, we had this increase in revenue because of an increase in people, and therefore an
It's a
increase
talking
in crime and whatever.
It's both sides.
But your percentage, when you're working off percentage, the percentage, they stay the same. They got to still operate in that same
That's right.
percentage.
Exactly.
Now, if we decide that their percentage is wrong, whatever. but
We're in charge of the budget. I mean, let's
Maybe
be clear on
they
that.
can bring.
We are in charge of the budget.
If you took
powers we have.
this graph
a good one.
and averaged everybody what their reduction, you got it, what everybody reduced over the years here, and let's say you get 10%, then you look at their numbers, which is level, and you say, well, you're 10% too high. You should have been, this operation should have been 10% less, and then that is your percentage that you work off of.
Right.
Well, for example,
Maybe it'll happen that way.
in 07, 08, the millage rate looks like it was like 7.8, and it generated $13 million. Is that 13? 11, almost 12 million in revenue, compared to 8.5 today, which generates 8.5 million in revenue. So it all depends.
Mm-hmm.
There's clearly where the revenue, the millage rate dipped. Anybody else?
I think we finished with the budget, but I just want to come back to the priorities again. I think we did vote to have a priorities workshop, and I think the board took that action. I'd really like to see it happen, just to go through the exercise of
We
doing
have a
it.
workshop maybe before one of the meetings. Do we set a date on one? Did we officially set a date on it?
I'm not sure that we even voted for it. I I was for it, and you were for it, but I don't know that...
Yeah, I think we actually voted for it. I may be wrong, but...
Let's do it another day.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
No, I'm okay with another day. Maybe we can go back and look up the...
Next meeting, Howard, we can bring it up.
It was. Okay.
Maybe at the
All
next
right.
meeting you can bring it up.
Well, moving on. So I know, Randy, you're heading to wrap up, right?
That's correct.
I've learned your posture.
First, before we move on, do you have sufficient direction, you think, to start preparing a budget?
Yes, I got a couple things I want to talk about, just real fast. COLA increase, I understand we'll start at 2% and see where it takes us.
It's a $198,000 increase in salaries.
Okay?
2% for everybody.
I thought it was about $200,000.
If
All departments.
verify, if you will,
That's BOCC?
Yes.
Yeah.
like Howard said, we want to make sure that some other department, Donnie said he didn't, but on the Sheriff's Department, I don't think they gave their people a raise every year. I don't think they did.
We'll find out who's got raises.
And then how that would transfer into if it was across the board for
That's right.
everybody.
All right. Health insurance cost, last year it increased by 5%. We're going to project another 5% this year. We're going to factor that into the budget as well. To absorb it.
Now, are we willing to change providers? Because I know last year no one was willing to do that.
We're willing to change. The good thing about CHP is it's easy to use for our employees. It's a great benefit. But here's the only thing I'd caution you with, and this is even from experience as well with the company I just came from. United Healthcare is going to undercut everybody. Guaranteed. We bid it out tomorrow, they're going to undercut. The problem is, the next year, you're right back in line, if not higher. They will pinch you at the end of the day.
Did it again.
So, well, that's what I'm saying, the problem is we gotta try to, what I think we need to work on is that, like I was saying, is that loss ratio. That's what we got, because it's out of whack, and that's gonna whack us no matter what down the line.
And we did talk about that at length, I think, somehow.
Yeah.
They're looking at Blue Cross. I think the employees really don't want to do that. If I had to guess, they all want to stay on capital.
Well, I mean, they'll do whatever we have to.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, what we don't need to be doing is going to a provider that we know is undercutting, that we're going to get whacked.
And Ed, how do y'all's people, I mean, it was like Capital Health when I was there, now y'all have Blue Cross, United, how the people happy with it, or they rather have Blue Cross, or?
Well, all of us that at one time had capital health plan with this.
Like I said, when I was there, we all had Capital Health, and then now it's...
Clear, Capital Health is Blue Cross.
Yeah, Capital Health and Blue Cross are one and the
Different than
same.
You
United.
get a different policy
Right, all
under Blue
plans are
Cross.
not equal.
But you think the level of service was a lot better with Capital Health, is what you're saying?
Access to physicians is a lot
Access to
better.
the physicians, that's the problem, is this,
Yeah.
That's the only thing I would not change because of.
I know numerous private businesses that were on CHP, switched to United and switched back, like within.
I think it's not worth looking at, though.
yeah. And you're right, and we'll look at everything.
Humana and Blue Cross.
That's right.
I think we also looked at restructuring how the family plans were, and maybe try to save some money on that. Instead of you were single, married, 1, 2, 3 kids, and you already did that, didn't you, David?
Yeah. Now, we've also got a 0 position growth in here, but I want to look at adding another grant person. So I'm gonna see if I can factor that in here. The focus on grant opportunities, which goes into that, and requirement. So we're good. I'm good. That's all I need. I
Can
got
we
it.
do a
With that.
hybrid between Capital Health and Humana? I mean, is that even possible? Or do you have to have all one group?
I couldn't even come close to answering that question.
Let employees choose. Maybe they get a little extra money, take home pay if they switch to.
That way they have a choice. Because, I mean, I certainly don't want to put additional cost or loss of benefits on the backs of the employees, but if the cost keeps going up, we're putting that on the back of the taxpayers, and so,
We also have a cafe plan right now, too, don't worry, we got rid of that.
No, we got a cafe plan.
We're bidding out the broker services, right? So our broker can
Right.
with this.
Right, and hopefully, if it goes right, we're going to have a broker that'll be able to speak not that the lady couldn't do it, but this gets down into the weeds pretty heavy, so.
What's the
He gets
plan, just very briefly, if everything falls apart with the sheriff's department? We told them we wanted to work on a plan. I didn't say it, but my plan would be, y'all find a way to cut $1.7 million. That's what the plan is going to have to be.
If you lose what?
ICE. If you lose ICE,
If you totally lose ICE.
we could raise the millage rate to 10 mils.
If you
or-
totally, you're talking about
Yeah,
if you
totally
totally,
lose.
right now we've only lost half of them.
Well, yes, well, the number of
profitable,
prisoners
though.
fluctuates. If we lost it altogether, they could cut 1.8-something million dollars in expenses, but we'd lose $2.4 million in revenue. So somebody has to cut 1.7, or we'd have to raise
Or
taxes.
big tax rates.
Yes, big tax rates, that's exactly
You'd
right.
have to go up, you'd have to max your PST and your ad valorem.
Max
just
them
to
out,
break even.
just to break even. So,
Yeah.
this is a very serious issue that, I don't
But you're
know.
right, they will tote the brunt, they would have to tote the brunt of the
And I don't think that's an idea they like very much.
No.
No.
But that's,
We have, I'm gonna hit this again, we have like $3 million coming in at 100 beds. Is that correct? We're at 50 beds now, plus or minus, so we've got about $1.5 million coming in.
But we're spending a 1.2 million to make that 1.5 million. That's the secret key.
Okay, all right.
No, it's not 3 million.
here's how it works, is that 40, basically from 40 on,
We make no profit at 40.
no 40 you make no profit, you cover your costs, 40 on, you're making money.
1, 2, to
Say
make
1.2.
Okay, so, all right.
So if we're at 100, we're nicely subsidizing the
We're
budget.
making good
And
money.
now that number's coming
Oh, I
down.
understand that.
Yeah.
At 40, we're breaking even. At 39, we're losing money.
So either way, we're gonna run it a couple of different ways and get back to you, but you're right, at the end of the day, they'd have to, either that or you guys would have to make a choice, because it's not like we can cut, but the cuts I would be coming to you with,
Would fire everybody.
well, I'm talking, I would say, there's no more cutting employees. There's cutting programs, and it would be, you know, all our funding to the senior center is gone.
Libraries.
Our library, we have to close it down. The health department, extension office, all those ancillary services would have to get, so where we get down to a core base. And I'm not saying we'll do that, don't quote that, but that's what, you know, that's the type of cuts that so that's where you'd be looking at that, or do you say sheriff's department? Figure it
That's where the
out.
people's priorities would change, what level of service they're willing to
That's
put up
right.
with. Maybe they're willing to put up a little less level of service for law enforcement to keep the library, you know what I'm saying?
And here's what's crazy, you shut down all 5 that he just described, and you might have $500,000.
Right.
Yeah, that's what
Still have a $1.2
Yeah.
million deficit.
Yeah, that's on, either way, they're gonna tote the brunt of it.
Yeah. When they've got the biggest pot.
They got the biggest pot.
That's where the cuts have.
And
to
you
come.
kind of alluded to this at the beginning, but if we can, who knows if this thing is going to die quickly or we're going to pull out of this, but we got to work toward ending the process of budgeting in the hopes that we have a bunch of lawbreakers here. We got a bunch of inmates. You know, that needs to be gravy if we get it, but we can't bank on that. We don't need to budget for that.
And you're right, because what we gotta do is we gotta say, okay, we got this, we know we got this problem, and we may have it year over year, but somewhere we gotta climb out of it. We gotta work our way out of it and get it to where it's above the line and not below the line like it is now.
I talked to David, what I'd like to see is our legislature approve letting us do a flat MSBU for law enforcement.
We can do an MSTU for
Yeah,
it.
but it's still a millage,
Yeah.
not a flat rate.
Yeah.
If we could get the legislature to allow us to do, everybody pays $100 a year, everybody, whatever it is, everybody pays $200 a year, they could keep the funding level they need, it would reduce, we could drop the millage rate down to like 1.5 mils, really, or 2 mils, something drastically low.
Well, even if we did an MSTU, at least when the public looks at their tax bill, they know how much is going to
They
sheriff.
really don't want to do that,
Yeah.
of course, obviously.
I'm not saying we should.
That also doesn't give the whole picture. We're spending a lot more money than they are.
Yeah.
But a lot of that's grant money and you know,
We have
State-
to,
Operational-wise, they spend more money than we do, but grant-wise and stuff, and construction dollars, yeah, we spend quite a bit more money than they do.
so they're not the bad guy. I don't want to.
No, not at all, not at all.
But, you know,
It's tough, but I think where we gotta be is we gotta be patient. We gotta plan ahead, and then be bold enough to say, let's fix this problem and let's reverse this trend. Let's get out of it.
sandbagged on your revenue this year with all these,
All right?
even losing revenue and doing all this other stuff.
I can't
still-
stand. We just started, so don't
right.
jump to the last page and read the ending.
Okay.
All right, I think
All
we're
right.
done. Thank you.
Thank
Put a
you.
picture of David up there, you decide which one it is.
Yeah.